Hello, one and all, and welcome to episode 27 of ThROH The Years, the podcast where we review Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. I'm Trevor Day. I'm joined, as always, by Matt Feuerstein. And Matt, we got to just cut straight to it. The streak is over. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. The streak is over.
Yeah, you jumped right into it. I was going to be more subtle about it. I was going to say this, the show we're about to review tonight is a very historic show, and literally no one else in the world, including the people who promoted it and were on it, know why it's historic except for us. But now all the listeners know.
For those people who, our last episode did crazy high numbers to the point where me and Matt don't know. We suspect it's a glitch.
It definitely is. It's definitely a glitch.
But just in case, we should probably kind of clarify what the streak is, because some people might not be listening to every episode. They might be joining us new. And also,
literally half of our listeners are brand new, so they don't know anything.
But, and also, when we say it's probably a glitch, it probably is, but that's not to besmirch Dr. Keith, who did a great job as a guest on the last episode, or Pro Wrestling Only, who gave us a nice little, if you go to the Pro Wrestling Only website, ProWrestlingOnly.com right now, if you go to the podcast tab, we have our own little playlist selection under podcasts where you can, an easy place now to see every one of our old episodes to download or listen to. But, so that's not to besmirch them, I'm sure they helped, but it was a crazy high amount. But just in case, if there are new people listening, one thing we noticed while doing this show was a few episodes in, we started to realize, seems like there's been some incident of man-on-woman violence on every one of these shows we've been watching. And we just decided, well, let's keep track of that. How long could this possibly go before the streak is broken? I mean, maybe 6 shows, maybe 7. No, it was, as it turns out, the first 26 Ring of Honor events had some kind of man-on-woman violence or man-on-woman aggression, usually just outright violence.
And these events spanned literally a year and a half.
Yeah.
More than a year and a half.
And again, this was not something when we started the show we were like, oh, this will be something to look out for. It was just something that probably, I don't know, people who really listen to the archives, you might be able to find somewhere in probably the first 5 episodes, there was probably a moment where we realized, whoa, we should keep track of this because this is kind of weird. And, I mean, I've talked about this on Twitter, but the fact that they ended the streak on a show called Tradition Continues is, this is some Bernstein, Bear stuff where Gabe must be altering history with a time machine just to screw with us, because how can you end the streak on a show called Tradition Continues?
Also, that name really means nothing. What tradition is continuing? Just the wrestling in Maryland? It's having wrestling in the state of Maryland is the tradition that's continuing. So really, that title clearly was chosen just as a troll on us all these years later.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just, I mean, the only way it could be more false advertising if it was just called Man-on-Woman Violence Forever. It was the title of the show. I mean, that's the only reason it could be more. I mean,
that was the name of that show in Boston in August. ROH Man-on-Woman Violence Forever. It's also the new name of this United States Supreme Court. Oh. Yeah, we're going there.
Boom. That's well deserved.
We're going there.
Also well deserved is the plug for ProWrestlingOnly.com. We've got a new plug. Matt, I don't have to do thinking anymore. I just got to read this. So I'm just going to tell you to check out ProWrestlingOnly.com to explore other podcasts along with match reviews, features and retrospectives, reviews of wrestling books, video games and matches, playlists, wrestler appearances in non-wrestling TV shows and movies, and more. You can also join the conversation by signing up at the Pro Wrestling Only forums. We've been online for over a decade, and with over 2,000 registered members and an archive of over 4 million threads, our message board is a vibrant community all its own. Whether you want to talk about a specific match in our match discussion archive, take a deep dive in the Microscope forum, or discuss more general topics from wrestling's past and present. Check out all of this and more at www.prowrestlingonly.com. I'll note, Matt, we have a thread in the like the plugs and podcast section. You know, people can certainly post there if they want to communicate with us. And I also want to make really clear, the Microscope forum is not a place to talk about microscopes. I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, no, this is pro wrestling only.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah. No, but I will say, just in all sincerity, Charles is really, like doing something new with the site. It's kind of a new mission statement that he has, and it's really been off to, a good start. He's been trying different things, experimenting, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So I'm looking forward to see where it goes.
Yeah, it's really cool. They've already got some book reviews up. They've got, they're trying to review like a lot of different things related to wrestling, and it's always good to see like new sites pop up, or in this case, a site that was mostly just a message board try to like broaden the scope. It's really cool to see. So yeah, definitely. If you've even been there like months ago, check it out because it's completely different now. It's still got the same message board if you like that, which I've been a reader of that message board for years. But if you were like, I'm not into message boards, well, there's a whole site component now. Our podcasts are much more visible. It's really cool. So actually, now we got to something we haven't had in the recent episodes, partly for time and partly just because there hasn't been a lot of news. But the news between the shows, I've got a couple pieces of news, and one that's only like tangentially related to Ring of Honor, but I just had to mention it because it's so weird. This is something I cut out from the last episode in the interest of time. But Matt, obviously, Ring of Honor's big competitor at this time on the Indies was MLW. There was a kind of a Court Bauer's promotion, which people who are keeping track of indie wrestling now will know it's had a big resurgence. It's on TV now. It's come back, and
I almost went to the taping the other night, but it was just couldn't make it happen on a work night.
That would have been cool, but yeah, I'm sure you will get more chances. But
yes,
there was a feud back against the burgeoning MLW and Ring of Honor back then. But there was also some differences in the product, even though they did a lot of overlap. And there's one really interesting story from a MLW show. Well, not really interesting, but I thought it was moderately interesting, which is the slogan for the show. That happened at an MLW show around this time, and I'll just read from the Observer. This is from an MLW show. The crowd also hated Samoa Joe because he doesn't have a good physique, and they started heckling him with cries of being fat and even told him to go to wrestling school since the match had a lot of missed spots. And I'll note this was a match against Mike Awesome. And Dave writes, somehow, seeing his opponent was Mike Awesome, you've got to figure Awesome had a lot to do with it. Because there are so many Samoans already in the promotion, and since Samu works and helps run things backstage, and Court Bauer learned a lot of the business from Alpha, they used Samoa Joe under his real name of Joe Sanoa, and he lost to Awesome, which also seems to show that the Awesome knockout on the All Japan show was an angle. I guess that was related to something then. It also means that MLW has the Ring of Honor champ doing a clean job at its TV disposal. So I just thought, I think rewatching the shows, we've realized Joe was pretty great right from the get-go in Ring of Honor when he came in late 2002. It's kind of crazy to think that in some places he was still go home fatty, you don't know how to work, in 2003.
I mean,
blew my mind.
Yeah, I would watch some ROH at this point, but I didn't really, start paying full attention to it till maybe 2004. I didn't start watching it regularly until 2005. So probably at this point, if I had seen Samoa Joe, not under that name at an indie event that I went to, I honestly might not have known who he was. So it's interesting. Just we've been so enraptured in Ring of Honor, it's been a major promotion to us for many, many years. So it's hard to realize, it still was a pretty low visibility promotion to the wrestling fan base at large in 2003. It must be weird for the wrestlers to go from being superstars in this one promotion to just being an indie guy in other places.
To literally apparently things I cut out of that review were some of the hot indie names that worked there at the time, the crowd didn't know them at all, but they popped for guys from the TV era of a few years prior. So yeah, going to what you just said, Joe goes from being a place where he's one of the top stars to a place where they don't know who he is, and people are just who's this fat schlub who's ruining a match with the amazing Mike Awesome? And
Right. Now, you think but Joe is so talented, and every month we see so talented that he will just win people over immediately with his physical impressiveness and charisma. And it's like, well, not every match does he get the opportunity to even do that stuff. So,
And I think there was a minority of fans, like even a couple years later when Joe was really getting big in terms of just popularity, there was always those few fans, and you see them sometimes with Kevin Owens now, who is just like, oh, he's fat. He like there's some people that if they see a soft-bodied guy, they just instantly, for some reason, they wanna hate them even if they're good.
yeah, in 2003 was probably the peak of the era where WWE was just hiring and promoting guys that all looked very similar, and none of them had soft bodies in any way, shape, or form. So you could see why maybe an audience at that time would be especially tough on Samoa Joe.
Yeah. And another story that happened between the last couple shows is the AP ran a story about Michael E. King of Springfield, Vermont, who pled guilty on October 1st of selling copyrighted pro wrestling tapes over the internet. King, age 30, faces a maximum 3 years in prison and a fine up to $250,000, plus full restitution of $16,000 to the companies. He will be sentenced on January 2nd. King, who used the name Markout Video, sold tapes of Ring of Honor, WWF, and WCW shows. There is certainly irony, Dave Meltzer reports, since it is believed that Rob Feinstein, the owner of Ring of Honor, was the one who turned him into the FBI. I remember people being very angry at Rob Feinstein for doing this.
Yeah, I wonder why people forgot about this a few months later.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, the main reason I wanted to bring this up is because something we'll talk about when we do the frightening Mount Everest episode that will be talking about the Rob Feinstein scandal and the wrestling show that happened around that time, is that there, a lot of people disliked Rob well before that scandal, and this was one of the things, because even Dave kind of calls it ironic, because Rob Feinstein had kind of started his career in part bootlegging things he didn't have the right to, and he even lost a lawsuit to, I think it was Dreamwave or something Entertainment, the people that owned Pride, so... Yeah,
well, it's also the fact that he had people who didn't like him was part of his defense when the bigger scandal emerges a few months later.
Exactly, that's a great point. So this is kind of going to give, if you listen to all these shows in a marathon binge over like 3 days in a year when we've done that episode, we're really just doing some foreshadowing and really coloring in everything. But yeah, these are the kind of things where, again, in a one way, you can't blame Rob. I mean, it was copywritten material, but on the other hand, people viewed it as a massive hypocrisy given that Rob wasn't clean here and this guy was facing I don't know what happened to this person, but... Yeah,
I'd be curious to know like what his eventual sentence was. I mean, I don't know, I guess it depends on the judge and this, and the court and stuff. If this was a first time offense, like if he was actually going to get real jail time for this.
And I guess I'll just admit this. The first time I bought a Ring of Honor show, I did not buy it from RF Video. I bought it not from this man, Michael E. King, but I did buy it from a tape trader because I had heard some bad things about RF Video's customer service. So I was actually scared enough to want to try Ring of Honor, but bought it from a tape trader. And then once I liked the show, I don't know what my teenage logic was, I then started buying a lot direct from Ring of Honor, but for some reason I was scared the first time, so I was like, I'm going to buy this from a tape trader I've never done any business with before because I trust them more than RF Video.
By the time I started buying ROH DVDs, it was already a separate company, Ring of Honor. So I never ended up buying from RF Video.
Yeah, and I don't know what other people's experience with I did most of my DVD buying when they were a separate company as well. I don't know what most people's experience was with them. I always got my DVDs, except one time I did not get an order. I wrote an email to them and no questions asked. They just sent me the same order again and it got to my house. So yeah. I bought a lot of DVDs and personally never had a problem with once they split.
Yeah.
Ring of Honor is a separate company.
The wackiest story that I have, I think I already told on the Death Before Dishonor episode, where I bought the original Death Before Dishonor, and it was a 2-disc set, but they accidentally put in Death Before Dishonor 2, Night 1 and Night 2. So I got those two DVDs for the price of one, and then just had to buy the original Death Before Dishonor again.
Yeah, so that was... error in your favor, depending on what your mood was to how quickly to watch that show. But and then the last little bit of news in the Observer around this period, they reported CM Punk is now working as head trainer at the new Ring of Honor Wrestling School. So this is when the school, I guess right around this time was when it had started. I believe Punk moved from Chicago to Philadelphia just to do the wrestling school. He talked about on a shoot interview he did in late 2003 where what got him into the wrestling school was just he had been laid off of his regular shoot job, as he said, in October 2002, and he didn't want to have another real job. He wanted to just make money solely off wrestling, and so at some point he goes to Rob Feinstein, I guess, and says, "Hey, like, can I get a job stuffing envelopes here? Can I anything around here? I just want to make some extra money, and I don't want to have a regular job again." And I guess Rob's response to that was, "How would you like to be the head trainer at a wrestling school we're going to start?" And he accepted, and I believe Punk never did have a regular job ever again after this. So,
I mean, I don't know what he's doing now. No, just kidding. But
unless you count writing comic books as a regular job, which I wouldn't.
No, I would not. And this is, I guess that means that Shane Hagedorn is about to attend his very first ROH show as a sort of part of the company.
Yeah, I mean, this is around the period where, for people that listen to his podcast, an honorable mention, we're probably getting to the point where, I don't know how involved he's in behind the scenes of the company at this point, but any show around this time going forward, he probably has more insight on in terms of, hey, I was around the company at this point. With that brings us to the show we are covering today, which is Tradition Continues, which took place October 16th, 2003, at Michael's 8th Avenue in Glen Burnie, Maryland, which is about 20 minutes from Baltimore for people that don't want to use Google Maps right now to figure it out themselves. It drew a reported crowd, and I wrote in my notes of who knows, because I always go by the Observer. But this time, in one spot in the Observer, it said 450, and then later on in the same issue, it said 350.
It's a pretty big gulf when you're talking about numbers like that. Yeah,
it's a small typo on the keyboard, just one key over. But yeah, in terms of an indie financial math, that's probably the difference. I'm going to bet it was 450 because I know they went back to Baltimore, and if it was 350, I don't think they would have gone back to Baltimore.
They almost went. They almost went back twice, but then something happened.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. A PW Insider live report from a man named Marcus Dowling said that on a night dominated by Game 7 of a tightly contested series between the Boston Red Sox and New York Yankees and WWE SmackDown, Ring of Honor drew a standing room only crowd of 500 plus individuals. So
I was definitely watching that game. I will say that.
So yeah, I mean, I think they even referenced that game on the commentary for the show, like something about the Red Sox and the Yankees. For those who haven't seen Michael's 8th Avenue, this building, if you look at the website for it or just look at the building, it's pretty obvious it's mostly seen as booked as a place for weddings. It has a pretty low ceiling by like indie wrestling standards, or at least what we're used to watching Ring of Honor, and it has very prominent fancy chandeliers hanging from the building, which definitely gives it a different atmosphere than any other Ring of Honor show held so far.
Although this certainly would not be the last venue they had with fancy chandeliers.
And if you go to the website for Michael's 8th Avenue, it's like nothing but wedding pictures, and then I think one upcoming event is like a Halloween rock concert. I think they've done boxing events before, and obviously they were open to this stuff, but if you look at their website, you would just go, "Oh, this is a nice place to have a wedding." If I'm in Maryland,
plus a giant photo of the victorious, spoiler alert, Grim Reaper and Slugga.
Oh, Grim Reaper. And in talking about this show, Dave Meltzer from The Observer got, I guess from Live Reports, he wrote, "Most of the TNA wrestlers, and AJ Styles in particular, were very over. It was harder for the performers who had never worked the city, as the crowd took a while to gel into them." Kind of a weird phrasing there, Dave. As per usual with Ring of Honor, reports were it was a great live event, but more old school style, since that's what the crowd seemed to like, than their shows in other cities.
I read that too, and I was thinking about, like, is that something that rings true to me?
That's why I kind of brought that up. I wanted to know, because I didn't really notice that, and I think even PW Insider had a live report at the time, and they said something like the fans like the Ring of Honor guys really had to earn it, but like the bigger names that the fans already knew, I didn't really notice that much, and I didn't really notice
the old school style. Yeah,
yeah. Maybe it was just more subtle, but I didn't notice like it did not feel dramatically different in reaction or performance to most Ring of Honor shows of this era.
Yeah, I would firmly agree with that.
But I did get from more than one live report, there was they kind of suggested a little bit different. So, and then the last thing before we get into what we actually saw on the DVD, did not make the DVD, but apparently the promotion held a 10-bell salute for the late Stu Hart at the onset of the show, who had recently just passed away. So that's a nice little thing. It didn't make the DVD, but it happened. So we start the show with Gary Michael Capetta in the ring, and he does a little like minute-long speech. He puts over the the Baltimore market, and I guess this is where the show's name Tradition Continues goes over. He talks about some major wrestling events that happened in Baltimore, and eventually Prince Nana interrupts. He makes his way to the ring. Nana's mad that he hasn't received a Ring of Honor title shot yet. The crowd chants "We don't care," which I thought was pretty funny and rude chant.
Appropriate, also.
And soon Samoa Joe comes out to interrupt the interrupter. He gets a Joe chant and a solid round of applause. So again, this is my first sign that, Joe wasn't a known TV commodity at this point. He got a solid reaction coming out here. Nana demands he gets a title shot right now. Joe accepts. He almost immediately attacks, but then Nana makes a bit of a comeback during this. Like, I was surprised that Nana actually got a bit of offense here. But then eventually Joe just hits it enziguri, a suplex, rear naked choke. And there's no ref in the ring, so Nana is tapping, and then Capetta just has to get on the house mic and announce Joe's the winner, which was a little awkward, but, I mean, it's an impromptu match. I guess adds to the fact that it wasn't, the vibe that, it's not planned.
Joe said that he was putting the belt on the line, though, which made me go, like, what about the top 5?
Nana going to drastically fall down the top 28 rankings here tonight. Joe gets back on the mic. He welcomes the crowd to Ring of Honor. He puts over the great show we're going to see tonight. Then Joe says he's going to choke out Jay Briscoe, which brings out Jay, who grabs the mic, asks Joe to choke on this, and then hits him with a Yakuza kick. They trade blows until officials and Mark Briscoe run in to break it up. This was a textbook segment when Gabe goes into a new market, have the bright, colorful, cartoonish character come out like a Christopher Street connection or a Nana, and then have someone that's like a, either a real tough badass or a main event star or both in the case of a Samoa Joe or a low key, come out and just destroy them early to kind of let you know, here's a big star, here's what Ring of Honor isn't, even though like a fifth of our company actually is this thing that we're squashing, and welcome to Ring of Honor. So
yeah, and I here's the thing that I took away from this segment, because I actually think this is a fairly noteworthy segment. This is really the first time that I've noticed that they really put Joe in there as the face and voice and spokesperson of ROH. This is a role that Low-Ki was sort of playing early on in the first few months of 2002. And this is Joe being like, this is Ring of Honor, this is what you're going to see. And obviously Joe plays that role a lot over the next few years. He is like the face of ROH. But he hasn't really been positioned that way at this point in our rewatch. And this is the first show where he really is. He is the guy in ROH. He's been the champion, but now he's the guy. And I don't know, I guess we'll see how much it continues, but it felt like that watching it here, and I can't remember it feeling like that before.
And even if you look at the fact that he's getting the main event here as world champion, one of the problems with Xavier's title reign was they didn't seem to have the confidence in him to main event some of his singles matches as champion, and that's the only real reign we have it to compare it to, because Low-Ki's reign lasted one successful title defense and then he lost to Xavier. But here, Jay Briscoe was not a big star yet. He was a noted name on the indies, but he was still really young and wasn't huge yet. And so I feel like if this was Xavier, not only would he had not gotten a segment like this, but he probably would have not main evented. We saw what happened when they had Xavier versus Jay Briscoe. It would be on the undercard, and you'd probably on a night like this have CM Punk versus AJ Styles main event. But here, it's just, I think it's a sign of Joe's, like you said, the growing confidence in Joe. Like, no, Joe's going to be the main event. He's the champ. We have faith that he can like end the show well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of which defenses Joe got to actually main event with. So this one, the one against Daniels, which was a long built-up match. The one against Homicide, and Homicide obviously is a big push guy in ROH. And then the one against Doug Williams, which, kind of random, actually. But have any of the other... Has Joe main evented as in a singles title match? Oh, against Paul London also, in Paul London's farewell match. And that's it. Yeah. So this actually is, like you said, a good show of confidence in him, because this is the sort of guy that you wouldn't expect him to necessarily main event with, and he does, and I mean, we'll get to it, but I think it was a good choice.
Yeah. And we have another thing. I got this from I went to archive.org and found in the Wayback Machine an old Death Valley Driver live report, where it was sort of like a classic Death Valley Driver live report from where a bunch of the guys went to this show. And they had a little interesting tidbit that wasn't on the DVD. So one of them talked about how, at this point in the show, I guess, they announced that a couple in the front row had driven from I guess the Ring of Honor announced, Gary Michael Capetta or someone announced that a couple in the front row had driven from Miami to Baltimore to see this show as part of their honeymoon. So what a honeymoon! What a honeymoon destination tradition continues.
I'm not gonna judge. It's classist. It's wrong. I'm not gonna do it. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say.
I think it's cute that you went to a wrestling show on your honeymoon, but the thing is, you drove from Miami to Baltimore for Tradition Continues. I would have been like, honey, how about we wait a few weeks and go to that New Jersey show? How about we wait for main event spectacles?
Yeah, I mean, just the idea that listen, I was going to make a joke about Baltimore, but now I'm also not going to do that. I'm just very politically correct. That's what I'm trying to say.
Look, Matt, they loved crab cakes and chandeliers. Baltimore has both here at Michael's 8th Avenue, and it's as simple as that. So,
I guess it is that simple.
Next we cut to Colt Cabana somewhere. It looks like it's backstage, but an on-screen graphic says it's the Second City for the second ever Good Times, Great Memory segment. Colt is at his desk, and he says he beat Rob Feinstein at Dreidel and is the Dreidel master. Colt says CM Punk will be on later, but first he brings in the Backseat Boys. The Backseat Boys have cigarettes. Colt points out that he has a thank you for not smoking sign on his desk. Colt then shuffles through some note cards that he's written jokes on. We only see the backs of these cards, and as he shuffles through them, we see that he has written on the back of them, "These two are so gay for me." Kind of what makes this a little bit weird, awkward, or funny, depending on your view, is that Johnny Cashmere years later would come out as gay. So
yeah, it's also just a dumb thing to say. Yeah, but yes, I guess in the grand scheme of things, not even close to the most homophobic thing ROH has ever done, so I guess I can't get too mad.
And it's also, again, it's always weird when they do these gay things when it's like Rob Feinstein is running the company, and it's just it's not on the level of when young Wade Keller interviewed Bill Watts, and Bill Watts made horrible homophobic comments, and Wade was just like, yeah. But, it is always extra weird. I mean, it's always bad to make weird, gay jokes and stuff, but it's extra bad when kind of the guy that's paying you is, maybe, I wonder how he felt deep down about this, but Colt asks the backseats how they can beat Special K a second time. Cashmere says, well, it was easy the first time. Trent actually gets offended that Colt's even asking that, why are you even asking us this question? Trent then cuts a solid, actual kind of serious promo. Colt then asks the backseats if they've ever gotten, quote, chubbed up when people stuck dollars down their pants during their ring entrance. They said yes. Matt, this was a segment.
My takeaway was, man, I mean, Trent Acid's a much better promo than Johnny Cashmere. Much better. So it is not surprising that he was the standout guy from the two of them once they broke up. He actually had a lot of talent, that guy. He's not someone that people really talk about too much now as being sort of like it's a shame what happened, but it is a very big shame what happened because he had a lot going for him, especially that really thick Philly accent.
You love that accent.
I
He has
do. I do love that accent.
you know the weird thing?
The only accent I love more is Ian Rotten's Baltimore accent.
You know what's weird is I have a bad ear for accents, so I never really noticed it that much. After on the last show you brought it up, when I watched this promo, all I could notice was his Philly accent. And it reminded me of when I was a kid. There was a year of my life as a fussy eater. I've grown out of it, but when I was a kid, there was a year where every day for lunch I had Lipton chicken noodle soup, like the gross yellow. And one day my mom says, "Don't you think this is salty?" And all of a sudden, from that day, all I could taste was the salt, and I never ate it again. That's what you've done to me with the Philly accent. Now it's all I can focus on, thanks to your comment. You completely changed my brain.
Well, it's actually that. Well, you're welcome. First of all, I ate that. You mean the Lipton tea with like the packets that you put into the water, and then like
the Lipton chicken soup. That's basically just like yellow water with maybe a little tiny pieces of parsley and the noodles. And there's no meat. Yeah. I lived on that for like a year as a kid.
I loved that too when I was a kid. I have not had it in good 20 plus years. I guess it would have to be more than 20, but like 25 years probably. But so the thing about the Philly accent was I never really picked up on it as a thing until I watched ECW in the late 90s, because if you watch like TV and movies set in Philly before that, like Rocky for instance, everyone had a New York accent. And I assumed that was just the Philly accent. And then I would watch ECW, and I'd hear like the Sandman talk, and I would hear like Francine talk and Stevie Richards, and I would be like, "What? These guys are talking funny." And then I realized, oh, that's how they talk in Philadelphia. And then I'd hear the Dead Milkmen, and I'd be like, oh yeah, this is how they talk in Philadelphia. and it's so, or as they say, Philadelphia. In Philly, Foley.
This is Matt talking, not me. Just
hey, listen, it's an accent. I have one. I have one too. It's fine. You have one too. Don't you think you don't?
Oh, son of.
We all have them, and that is the Philly one. And so does Trent Acid. That's my point.
And that brings us to our first official match that wasn't impromptu. That would be a tag team scramble match of the debuting Rottweilers. The original Rottweilers were, in fact, not Ricky Reyes and Rocky Romero, but Grim Reaper and Slugger, escorted to the ring by Julie Smokes, and they defeated Danny Doring and Josh Daniels, Slick Wagner Brown and Sanjay Dutt, and the Ring Crew Express. And this match was 8 minutes, 16 seconds long, and Slugger pinned Dunn after hitting a body bag. Matt, before I hand it over to you for your thoughts, from PW Insider comes this, which was the team of Slugger and Grim Reaper was a last-minute substitute as Special K members Deranged and Hydro missed the show. Hydro is believed to have missed the show due to a personal commitment, while Deranged no-showed due to transportation issues. The company wasn't aware that he was going to miss the show. So apparently the debuting original Rottweilers was thrown together last-minute thing.
And they were victorious, which is interesting also. I had actually forgotten about the existence of Grim Reaper when I started watching this match. I remembered that Slugger was going to be in the original version of the Rottweilers, always. I always remembered that. Like, as soon as we started doing this rewatch, I was like, oh yeah, the Rottweilers, they start, and like, for some reason, like, Slugger is one of the guys. But I remembered the other guys being probably Benny Blanco or something. And I was like, oh yeah, Grim Reaper. So that was weird. Obviously, it's weird to have Doring in it, although he doesn't look too out of place, I guess. Like, it's not like he's not as bad as I thought it would be. But I like that there are some new faces in the scramble match. It wasn't the best scramble, but I liked it. It was just wasn't the same guys, because for a long time it was like, okay, Carnage Crew, some Special K iteration, the SAT, and this one is just full of different guys. Besides Danny Doring, obviously his partner is Josh Daniels. And he's pretty talented. And it's interesting because we see so many talented guys who made it in early ROH. So it's kind of interesting to see the guys who faded out. Josh Daniels is not, a star in NXT today, for example. But he was pretty good, I thought. He had a kind of a Roderick Strong-esque / Davey Richards-esque vibe to him at this point. And, he didn't have a ton of charisma, but, neither did Roderick Strong at the beginning, right? So
Well, I think you could tell just listening to the commentary on this that Gabe had a bit of that, not quite on the level, but a little bit of that John Walters kind of man crush on, hey, this guy's a solid physique. He seems like a solid, fundamentally sound worker.
yeah,
I could see myself liking this guy.
I could definitely see Gabe liking him, honestly. I thought like the crowd definitely seemed to be the most into the Ring Crew Express because they're cult favorites and they did well. I actually thought that Sanjay Dutt was the star. This was his ROH debut, was it not?
I believe so, and he was. I thought he was hugely over here. Apparently, he had worked the defunct Baltimore promotion in the area that we'll talk about a little bit later.
That was Maryland Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, so that might have also been part of the reason why he was so over, is that he was probably known to a bunch of these fans.
Yeah, and I mean the twisting Phoenix that Dutt does. I thought that was like one of the highlights of the match. Then he hits a dragon suplex on Daniels. I actually thought Reefer didn't look so bad. He hit a really good frog splash on Dunn, and then Slugger hit the body bag for the win. I thought this was a shorter than normal scramble, but I didn't mind it. Like I thought, there was enough chances for enough people to look good, and it was entertaining enough. This is not anything that you might want to go out of your way to watch, but they did a fine job with what they were given. I don't think anything was bad about it. Dutt is obviously he's a pretty hot property at this point. Like this is when he's really bursting onto the scene. The one negative besides that it was short and not much to it was Punk on commentary. I thought he kicked Ray out of the booth, and I thought he was pretty much just a distraction in this match. Although he does crack Gabe up when he says that he thought that Slick Wagner Brown's blonde hair was natural. That was the one thing Punk added to the match, but otherwise it was short, it was fine. Dutt looked good. I like to see some new faces. So overall my impression was positive, even though it wasn't anything to write home about.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I agree. I thought it was an average scramble, but it did have, as you said, the novelty of some fresh faces. Josh Daniels murdered someone with a German suplex that looked good. I thought Grim Reaper looked a little more hit and miss than maybe you did. There was one senton, I think it was to Marcos, that looked like he absolutely just killed him. You're supposed to kind of just hit with the edge of your back and kind of roll off the guy. He just came down with a lot of weight on this poor man and looked like he murdered him. But maybe, what do I know? Maybe it didn't hurt him that much at all. Yeah, I thought Sanjay was the most over guy right from the jump, but then I felt like the Ring Crew Express got more over as they did some of their stuff. I feel like the Ring Crew Express at this point was just one of those acts that is just so infectiously likable that if you just let them do their thing for a few minutes, most crowds are going to go, hey, these guys are fun. Especially when they do stuff like that gory bomb that Dunn likes to do, which I think always seems to get over to a surprising degree. People love that move. Yeah, I mean, and Ring Crew Express, for what they do, they're good. Yeah, they're a fun cult act, and it's kind of cool that I feel like in indie wrestling now, it's all just one level of guys, which is really talented young wrestlers shooting for the moon, all getting really good opportunities, but in Ring of Honor at this time, there was tiers of guys, and you could have your little niche. The Ring Crew Express were never going to get a long, serious run of 20-minute matches against top acts, but they were going to always have a spot here for years as this niche, fun little undercard cult thing that the crowd always appreciated seeing. Right, and every once in a while, they get slight push-ish kind of thing, and then they kind of be dropped back down to their level again, and that's fine. I wouldn't have minded if they got a little bit more of a push than they got, but it's also not a horrible thing to have certain guys that are just they're not everyone's going to make it to the top, not everyone's destined to rise up the same ladder, and some guys just have kind of their guaranteed spot and roll to serve, and these guys did, and they were great at it. So I agree. Next, we have a Field of Honor Block A match. Matt Stryker defeats Chris Sabin via pinfall in 10 minutes, 4 seconds after he hits a Death Valley driver. It's weird. In some ways, if I edited out some things, you would look at this match and go, it was okay. It was an average match. But it was notable for, I would say, a good handful of really obvious ugly botches, and most of them were committed by Matt Striker. I don't know if he had an off night. I don't know if they just had a bad chemistry, he and Sabin, but it's weird. Like, a lot of people really get down on Matt Striker. I'm not as down on him as a lot of people are, and I don't think you're as down on him as I am even. I kind of see him as a technically sound, kind of solid, fundamentally guy who technical wrestler who often he'll do a lot of technical wrestling at the start of his match, but not really have it play into the end of the match. But he's an average. He usually gives you a good average match, and I always saw him as a guy that he can have good fire once in a while, but he doesn't have a ton of charisma.
We should note for our thousands of new listeners that this is Matt Striker with a Y, not the famous one from WWE.
The unibrow with the Y, not the double brow with the I. So, but with that being said, one thing I don't think even a bunch of Striker's harshest critics would criticize him for, especially not me, is being a sloppy worker. I think one of his strengths is he's usually not sloppy. And if you watch this match, at first I noticed just a couple bits of minor miscommunication that were so minor I was like, maybe those weren't even miscommunication. Maybe I'm just being weird. But then there's a big power slam spot where Chris Sabin springboards off the top rope, Striker catches him and just turns into a power slam, and he barely rotates Sabin enough. Sabin almost lands right on his head, could have killed the guy, to the point where even though he does get him over, it looks like just enough, the crowd chants, "You fucked up" at Striker. Then a little while later comes a Sabin drop kick that looked like it smacked Striker right in the face. Then a little bit later, we get a Matt Striker powerbomb where he almost loses Sabin mid-move, and Gabe tries to cover this up by being like, Sabin shifted his weight, so he didn't have to take the full brunt of that impact. So I appreciated Gabe desperately trying to save this. But the biggest botch was right at the end, where Striker does something that we've seen him do before, which is Sabin goes for a crucifix. Striker rolls through the crucifix so that Sabin is already on his shoulders for the Death Valley Driver, which is like his non-submission finisher, except for whatever reason with the momentum or whatever, Striker can't seem to fully stand with Sabin. He can't really get comfortable with him on his shoulders, but he decides to do the Death Valley Driver anyway, and as a result, they bonk heads together, and immediately that's the finish, but immediately Sabin's head, he looks like he's been hurt. His head is gashed open. Apparently a gash so bad he needed 11 stitches was the report to close it. And people had wrote at the time, too, that Sabin was they were very lucky this happened at the end of the match because Baltimore has a notoriously strict athletic commission when it comes to blood, and they would have probably had stopped the match mid-match if this had happened any point earlier. So, yeah, in some ways this was an average match. In some ways, if you just focus on the botches, it was kind of below average. It was like a very uncharacteristic performance from Matt Striker, I thought.
Yeah, I thought that it wasn't his best match anyway. I thought there was a little bit missing from just the way they clicked, even if you took out the botches and stuff. But there was so much sloppiness. I actually, when Striker hit the botched power slam that spiked Sabin on his head, the crowd immediately jumped in with a "you fucked up" chant to the point where I was like, man, I don't know if this Baltimore crowd is an ROH crowd. Not that you never heard this stuff in ROH, but how excited they were to start chanting it. The original ROH crowds would have not been cool with that, I don't think.
And I don't even think that was a complete botch. That I looked more as that's a close call. At least it looked like to me. You could tell he barely accomplished it, but it wasn't. He did not die. He did not land right on top of his head, I don't think. But he just barely got that rotation through.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Close enough, though, that they clearly so we're like, okay, here we go. We can chant it now.
Yeah.
The thing that bugged me was Gabe's usual shtick, where after Striker hits the DVD, Gabe yells, "Did you see his head hit his face?" And I was like, well, no, because it wasn't visible at all on camera. So, Gabe was just doing his sort of know-it-all, I know there's an injury, so I'm going to act really smart about it. Because, there was no way, I rewound it or whatever you would call it, skip back a few seconds to watch it again. You definitely could not tell by watching that move that there was a botch from the angle that they showed it. You could tell after when you saw Saban's head, but if it wasn't for Gabe's commentary before showing it, I wouldn't have known anything was wrong. So the return of Know-It-All Gabe. But yeah, this match did not work on a number of levels. Obviously. I thought it was interesting after the match. The crowd, I mean, the referee was calling for help for a long time. And it took a while for a bunch of other refs to come out with a towel to help Saban, and the crowd really gave Saban a big round of applause at the end. Saban was only 20 years old here. It's crazy how young some of these guys were.
Yeah, holy. And if you watch that also, not only do they eventually get the towel, but then if you notice at the end, I guess because it was taking so long, after he gets the towel, there's even a little shot where finally even Rob Feinstein comes down the aisle and like throws a towel into the ring. So I guess Rob was probably back going, oh, Jesus Christ, like they're not getting the towel fast enough. So even he came out with a towel.
Interesting that they impromptu booked this post-match thing where they followed Stryker and Saban to the back and had a little promo between them in the backstage. Like they really just came up with that on the spur of the moment where Stryker was like, I was just trying to win the match, man. I'm sorry. I was just trying to win the match. And obviously that wasn't planned, obviously, because Saban didn't plan on getting hurt. So
yeah, I was gonna ask you. I was wondering, for those who don't watch this, occasionally Ring of Honor would follow guys as they walked back through the curtain after their match, and then instantly, like, as they go through the curtain, have them cut a promo. So it's kind of like this seamless, oh, you're right there in the action kind of thing. And they did this for this match, except it's all about this real shoot injury Chris Sabin just suffered. So do you think that they had already planned a promo in this style and then just changed the topic of it on the fly, or if they just knew enough to like, let's just roll with this, the cameras are following us, because like they're just talking about like, oh, I'm sorry I hurt you, which, you know, this, if you watch this, it was clearly not planned. It's a clear real cut. So
yeah, I mean, I guess probably the former, that there was something planned anyway and they just were like, well, let's go with what happened. Because or else that would be a lot of just like, that would just be, I don't know, very quick movement on this, and you know, people wouldn't have really had time to be told about it.
Yeah,
like it would almost be ambushing an injured Chris Sabin with having to do like a kayfabe promo in that moment, which doesn't seem very nice.
Yeah, I mean, depending on if he was really badly concussed, like, this would be the kind of thing today people would look down on. Like, why are you having him cut a promo when he's got his bell rung? But you know, back then, you wouldn't think nothing of it. But
yeah,
the only other thing I noticed from this match was Gabe continues to say on commentary that the winner of the Field of Honor will get so much prestige that their career will skyrocket. And I know, you know, that was the intention of this tournament, but just knowing the future, I always just kind of cringe every time I hear that, like, knowing what's going to happen. Like, I know how this book ends. It's not the ending that you want, and I just feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Let me just see. Next match was a Field of Honor Block B match. So we're going to the other block. Colt Cabana defeats BJ Whitmer via pinfall in 11 minutes, 38 seconds after he hit some special rolling pin combination. I don't know exactly what you would call it. I'm bad with that kind of stuff. Matt, what did you think of the match, and do you have a better name than, as I wrote, some rolling special pin combination?
No, I just wrote it down as a wacky roll-up, which is, I guess, a flavor of fruit roll-up? I don't know. I thought there was a decent amount of comedy here, and I thought Punk actually, his commentary added to it this time instead of detracting it like he did from the last two matches. Because, you know, him and Cabana sort of have a shtick going with each other. Like, Punk got really excited when Cabana tried to do a bunch of nip-ups and then finally got it, and Punk was like, yeah, he did it. Punk on commentary was talking a lot about the whole Lucy situation, and he said that Steve Corino told him that it was the prophecy that did it. And it's kind of funny because he's talking about this in a Whitmer match where it turns out that Whitmer actually took out Lucy and joined the prophecy. So it's kind of, I mean, I don't know if this was already known at this point. I'm guessing it wasn't, but you know, maybe the audio was recorded close enough to the taping of Final Battle, so maybe it was. But yeah, I don't know. I thought the match was a little bit off. It wasn't great. You know, kind of Whitmer, it was kind of methodical. Whitmer doing power stuff, you know, Cabana coming back, and then, you know, He had hit a Colt for he escaped a Colt 45. Whitmer did, but Cabana suplexed him and folded him up like an accordion before that roll up. So Cabana got some impact moves too. There was some other funny stuff like Cabana got an iron claw on Whitmer, and Cabana and Gabe just scoffed like he's not a Von Erich. This isn't Dallas. But then Cabana got a 2 count off of it.
That was the weirdest moment because, Colt gets the Iron Claw. The crowd goes nuts. Some live reports said it was the biggest pop of the night. And Gabe on commentary sounds like outraged, like, oh, come on, the Iron Claw doesn't actually hurt. And he goes, BJ's just playing possum. And then BJ eventually comes back, and he's like, see, he was playing possum or something like that. It's like, no, he wasn't. Like, Gabe just is like, I don't know if Gabe has some horrible, like, where he just can't stand the idea of the Iron Claw.
Clearly.
But, like, he had, like, a violent reaction to Colt Cabana doing the Iron Claw, even though the crowd loved it.
Yeah, it's weird. The other thing about the crowd, which the crowd made me turn on them a couple times already, at the beginning of the match, they were chanting, he's a homo, I think at Cabana, and it's like, ugh, like... This one wasn't even brought on by the company, so these people are just assholes.
They were continuing a tradition, even if Ring of Honor didn't want to continue the tradition.
That's right.
Maybe we should look closer in that crowd and see if a male fan was hitting a female fan. Like, I don't know.
Oh God.
I'm just desperate, Matt, to keep this streak alive. It brings some sense of order to my life.
No.
This was. Yeah, I thought this was an average match. It was just very middle of the road. The thing that stood out most was Colt's comedy. The crowd really got into Colt's comedy. Like, he gets tripped by BJ when BJ does a drop down, and the crowd chants, you fucked up at him. And then, even though that was probably a planned spot, and he, fakes walking to the curtain like he's going to leave, but then comes back. And it's funny that Colt's comedy is he's doing it more and more in matches, and it's really getting over. But I felt like in this match, it kind of clashed with BJ's style. Like, BJ's such a serious, hard hitting, American Strong style, whatever you want to call it, guy. And Colt is doing the wacky stuff. And to me, it was kind of like watching a cartoon try to interact with an action movie. It just was two different worlds, and sometimes that works. I felt here it was a little bit of not a styles clash, but more like a clash of tones.
Yeah, I think I would blame BJ completely for this one, because I think that Colt was smart to do that. It gave him a different kind of hook. I thought his stuff was clearly working. So I blame BJ for just not having the wherewithal to roll with it.
BJ was trying to have his BJ Whitmer match, and Colt was just doing what was getting over, and they didn't really mix. Yeah, you're right. You're right there. This is I guess both of these matches. It's a continuing thing.
By the way, Cabana is 2-0 now.
Yeah, and BJ is I think 1-1 now.
Yep, 1-1.
But I guess one thing is, I wonder if we're going to. The Field of Honor is not over, but knowing that the final has a pretty bad reputation, I wonder if we're ever going to see an actual really good Field of Honor tournament match, because this tournament was built to try and raise the level of some of these mid-card guys, and so far I think we've gotten mostly, maybe entirely, just a bunch of 9 to 12 minute kind of middle of the road average undercard matches, nothing horrible, nothing great.
Well, the best Field of Honor match was actually probably the qualifying match between Stryker and Whitmer. The one from Connecticut that ended in a draw, right? That was probably actually the best of any of them so far.
Yeah, so it's weird because no one here is really. I don't think they're really being put in a position to steal the show, but no one also is really taking the reins themselves. No one's usually there's been no standout performances so far in this tournament. Which in a tournament you kind of hope you're going to get at least a couple. Wow, someone really elevated themselves tonight.
Right, and everybody involved in the tournament, they're not the best of the best at this point in ROH, but they've all had great matches.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's impossible. It is weird that the tournament is actually seemingly bringing these guys down in terms of their peak performance and not lifting them up at all.
Yeah, and the only other thing is Punk's commentary sometimes gets on my nerves. These couple shows I've seen him on, but whenever he snarkily brings up that BJ is a horse, again, just to needle Gabe for comparing BJ to a horse, I love that he's keeping that going, and that's one of the best things Punk has done in his career. Like every time he's like, "Hey, Gabe, isn't BJ a horse?" And just I love that Punk has the ability. Like he's so comfortable with Gabe that he can really like twist the knife on Gabe and tease him in a way that probably most wrestlers aren't comfortable doing.
It is cute
So-
that they clearly have this this bond already.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like the only other guy I've really seen that with is like Samoa Joe, and shoot reviews will like lovingly kind of tease Gabe and talk about his tantrums and stuff. And I don't know how many wrestlers ever got that relationship with Gabe where they felt close enough where it's like, yeah, I can kind of prank this guy or like joke around with this guy, even though he's also kind of my boss. And yeah, it's interesting. After the match, Colt's backstage, and he tries to cut a serious promo where he says that he was serious tonight and that when he steps in the ring, it's all serious, which was weird considering that like half of this match was Colt Cabana comedy. Like, that was a real weird moment, I thought.
Yes, I agree.
Next, we have AJ Styles backstage, and he's giving Jimmy Rave tips for his match tonight. Our next match is a Ring of Honor tag team title match. That would be Special K of Dixie and Izzy defeating the Backseat Boys of Johnny Cashmere and Trent Acid in 8 minutes, 45 seconds when Izzy pinned Acid after a springboard 450. I don't know why the Backseat Boys lost the tag titles in their very first defense. I'd be interested in knowing why. I have some suspicions, but I don't know for sure. I thought as a match this was below average. I think the problem was Special K and Backseat Boys, they ended the gauntlet match on the last show where Backseat Boys won the tag titles, and I thought they had a real fun few minutes where they just went crazy, did a lot of wild stuff. It pretty much hit it all. And here, this is a much more traditional tag match. This Johnny Cashmere gets hurt on the outside on a move, and Special K isolates and double teams Trent Acid. They build to a hot tag, and I just feel like that wasn't playing to Special K's strengths. I like traditional tag matches like that, but Special K weren't especially compelling, like beating down Trent Acid, and this match just had way less of the cool high flying I want from these two teams. And then on top of that, you get all this needless interference near the end of the match where there's distractions that last forever, multiple Special K run-ins, the ref's making a 2 count at one point, and Lit from Special K just pulls the ref out, and there's no DQ. And then even at the end, Trent Acid gets hit with a belt shot. They Special K make a cover. Trent Acid kicks out, so you think, oh man, maybe Backseat Boys are going to win this. But nope, Special K just hit 2 more moves and the match ends. So it was like a twist just to have a twist. And I don't know, the whole match kind of felt like something you would have seen on like Raw in 2000, and not in a good way.
I like this match a lot more than you did. I thought it was good. Like I thought it was a pretty good match. I thought they started off with enough of the wacky spot, the big flying spots. Like one in particular that I thought was cool was that Special K hit this almost like one of them held Cashmere like almost in like a wheelbarrow position, but like with his head facing the floor. And like on the floor of the ringside, next to the ring, and the other one came off the top rope with a leg drop, so like it was like a leg drop face plant like double team move, and I thought that was really cool. I thought Izzy's reverse Rana always looks good, and then once it settled into a regular tag match, I thought it worked because it's sort of the thing you could see on Raw, but it's not the sort of thing you see in ROH. So it kind of worked as like, oh my God, what are these dastardly heels doing to our tag team titles? So all the interference and the belt shot. Like it is very traditional, like Raw or even TNA kind of stuff. But I thought it worked here, and I thought Acid's kick out was surprising. Maybe partially because I knew that Special K was going to win here, and I thought that might be the finish because I hadn't seen this match in a long time. But like that happened right after the backseats hit the dream sequence, hit the T gimmick. The crowd was going nuts for it. And then Lit pulled out the ref, then the belt shot, then the 450 on Acid for the win. I thought that wacky hijinks kind of worked. So I thought it was a pretty solid match. And the other thing that really stood out to me that made me happy was this was the ROH debut of the Final Countdown, because during their post-match celebration rave, there was a techno version of the Final Countdown years before Bryan Danielson introduced it to ROH. So they are the originators of that song in ROH.
One thing I noticed with the Backstreet Boys in this match, I think we've mentioned it before, but they were such a unique act, at least for Ring of Honor, in their reactions, where I would say 8 times out of 10, it seems like they get a really mixed reaction, where like there's women screaming, which you never hear for pretty much anyone else on these shows. There's some people booing that don't like them, and there's some people that cheering. And usually by the ends of their matches, they've won some extra people over. It's like it's such a weird kind of passionate mixed response that no one else on these shows gets. Like they had something different, and I know some people love Backstreet Boys as workers, some people hate them.
I don't think Backstreet Boys ever really had a really good tag team match in ROH.
Yeah, but there's just something. There's something they bring to the table, like, and again, most of that's probably Trent Acid that we've talked about before, where he just had something you couldn't quite put your finger on, but there's definitely like an energy when they perform that no one else has. And I don't think they're like great as a tag team. I don't think they're bad, but at least in what we've seen so far, but there's just something they have. It's and in a way it's kind of tragic. They never, like this is kind of their high point was winning the tag titles on the last show.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I know you didn't like the match, but this to me might have been their best tag team match in ROH so far. I mean, I guess you probably feel differently, but what's better than it? Obviously, the really good matches were Trent singles matches with Homicide, but as far as like tag team matches they've had, I mean, I guess you like their performance in the Gauntlet series better, but I think so far, at least, this is the best tag team match I've seen them in.
I mean, this is the most fundamentally sound match they've done in Ring of Honor in terms of it follows a very specific structure and everything kind of follows and makes sense. I guess it's just I kind of with Special K and the Backstreet Boys, I think I was primed for more just absolute craziness. With them, I kind of don't want structure. I just want like wild stunts, and I felt like this was them doing a much more traditional match. And also, I'm surprised you didn't mention this, but this was another instance of something I know you love that you've already pointed out happening once in the show, which is Gabe knows everything. At the start of this match, Gabe telegraphs the title change by saying he thinks the Backseats will hold the titles for a long, long time.
Oh, yes, that did bug me. I think I must have skipped over that in my notes. Yeah, he says it twice, actually. And it's like, all right, well, now we know what's happening.
This is something Gabe would never do in any other title match, but it's one of those things, like, I don't mind as an announcer knowing some things that happen and like going, I predict this guy's going to win, and then he wins, but then you have to be wrong sometimes too. You can't be right every time.
So this time he was wrong then?
I'll actually, yeah.
He did exactly what you wanted.
God damn it! I just foiled myself there.
I like it.
Okay, Gabe did great.
I'll edit it out if you want me to.
No. I guess I was just stupid there. See, you know what? Gabe's the great at commentating because I'm the dumb one, not Gabe.
We're all the dumb ones compared to Gabe Sapolsky.
After the match, the lights go out. Special K rave until Loke runs in and gets beat down. This is where the Final Countdown was played, I believe. Gabe says DeVito couldn't be here tonight because he's working overtime at his regular job, which is one of those great moments of like indie wrestling honesty of like, guy couldn't be at the show tonight. He had to like work.
Well, he said it. It was honest because it clearly fits into the character.
Yeah, it works perfectly. And then the Rottweilers of Slugger, Grim Reaper, and Julius Smokes come in. They take out Special K to end the segment. Something I thought was interesting when I was reading like the PW Insider stuff was, I didn't know this, and I don't even know if this is true. This just came from like one report in PW Insider, but they say H.C. Loke just became Ring of Honor's first backstage agent at this point. So that's interesting to even think the idea that they had a backstage agent and it was H.C. Loke.
Yeah, that is interesting. I wonder like who else had that role over the years.
I know he was kind of a locker room leader in the sense of a year later when I've been going recently through some 2004 Pro Wrestling Torches, like one of the guys they would get on the record quotes from in Ring of Honor was H.C. Loeb. So it seemed like that was one of the guys probably where Gabe said, like, if you want to talk to guys, like, here's a guy that I trust, like, talk to this guy. He'll tell you what's going on.
Right.
But next, we get a match that's a little bit bigger. It's AJ Styles defeating CM Punk via pinfall in 18 minutes, 10 seconds after he turns a Shining Wizard into a Styles Clash in a great finish. Matt, before I hand it over to you, a couple things to mention. This match didn't really, it's one of the rare Ring of Honor matches that had, like, at least of this importance, of star level, that really had no story to it. And going into the Wayback Machine, Ring of Honor's website at the time said, you can now book Ring of Honor. Check out the poll on the left menu, and you can decide whether AJ Styles or Just Incredible will be Raven's opponent at Tradition Continues in the Baltimore area. The man in the poll who does not take on Raven will most likely be against CM Punk that night, although that is not a definite. So the reason why this match had no story is because they literally just put up to a random poll. And then before the match starts, Punk got on the mic. He says prescription drug use is on the rise. I wrote in my notes, oh my God, Punk foresaw the opiate crisis. So Punk 10 years ahead of his time. And he says people are doing their Prozacs and Percocets. And then he cut this normal straight edge promo. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, so about the match. Well, first of all, I almost wonder, like, for that poll, did people vote for the person they like better to win that poll, or are they voting against the person they like better because they wanted the AJ Punk match? Like, should AJ be offended by losing that poll, or should he consider it that he was done a solid?
Yeah, I have to think they weren't voting for Just Incredible versus Raven. They were voting for AJ Styles versus CM Punk.
We at least like to think that anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it was still fairly early in their careers, but I think even in 2003, I think that's the match the crowd would be more interested in. But
yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it would kind of be crazy to not be more interested in that. But as far as the match itself, so you had mentioned to me that Punk, and you might have even mentioned it, I don't remember if you mentioned it on air or off air, that after all these matches with Raven and Terry Funk, that Punk had said that he really just needed a match with a younger, more athletic guy so he could do the ROH style and show that he could really work that style.
Punk said in a shoot interview, he just said that he said something to the effect of, like, I went up to AJ before this match and was like, boy, I really need this match. And Punk said, it's not that I don't like working Raven, but I can't have, like, the athletic style of matches I like having. And then I guess AJ, he claims, said to him, like, I need this match too because I've been working Jeff Jarrett lately. So, like, apparently both guys felt maybe a little constrained in the months leading up to this.
Yes, and then you could tell, like, especially with Punk, you could tell he was working. He had his working shoes on, and he was full of ideas. Yeah, there was no hook to the match, but as far as just like a good wrestling match between two over stars, like you have to say that Punk and AJ did a good job. Like Punk, did a lot of mat wrestling with AJ early, which, I mean, it's very rare to see that from CM Punk, even in this era. That stuff, and he did a pretty good job. He held his own. There's just a bunch of cool spots. Like AJ, he went for the Styles Clash. Punk rolled out, but AJ landed on his feet, hit an enziguri, and Punk went to the outside. I thought that was a really good spot. Punk kept ramming AJ into the guardrail and sarcastically mocked the ref's instructions. Like the ref was like, "Getting back in the ring." He's like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that, sure." I like that Joe actually made an appearance on commentary. Another just thing that showed that Joe was being more promoted as a voice of the company. He stopped in to talk about his upcoming matches, to talk about Punk and AJ. It was just a quick pop-in moment. He didn't stay on the commentary for the whole match, but it was good stuff. But AJ went for the moonsault, reverse DDT. Punk caught him and hit a backbreaker. Just like a lot of stuff that you just don't see from Punk. They have their chop battle, which I'm sure Punk was happy to have one of those because that's in all of the epic ROH matches, right? Punk hit an arm trap DDT, and the crowd chanted ROH, so you could see the crowd was really into it to chant that after a DDT. AJ hit the discus lariat, and both guys were down. And AJ went for like a second rope styles clash, but Punk escaped. AJ caught Punk off the Shining Wizard, which is a really cool spot. Like, Punk went for the Shining Wizard. AJ caught his leg, but also like put his arm around the other side of him, stood up, hit the Styles Clash, got the win. I thought that was an awesome finish, and the match was very good. Everyone was motivated. Punk was really motivated. It was solid. It was, not a match of the year or anything, but just a good, like, undercard version of a match with two main eventers, if that makes sense.
I completely agree. I think this was, like you said, very good match. It's not. It's right in that level below, like the Steve. It's a level below, like the Steve Corino Homicide. Homicide Samoa Joe matches where it's like, oh, you have to go out of your way to watch this. It's not on that level, but it's very good. And yeah, like you could tell these two were just full of ideas, like you said, and just. I guess if you want to look at a flaw. There's not a ton of story to this. It's Punk does work on AJ's back, but it doesn't really go anywhere, mostly because Punk doesn't really have a lot of moves in his arsenal that like focus on the back. It's not like when he goes for the Pepsi plunge that works on the back or anything like that, or the Shining Wizard. But there was just a lot of cool ideas in this match. Like that early mat work not only was it just different from some Punk matches, but it's like a lot of it was Punk trapped in a leg vice, like the legs wrapped around his hips, and it didn't always look tight, but it was interesting. And then they both ended up doing headstands out of that and slapping each other while they're upside down. Like they were just trying to do inventive things. You could tell they probably were just like before the match going, want to try this, want to try this, want to try this. Like I think Punk in the shoot interview talking about this match even said that like the finish, the cool Shining Wizard into the Styles Clash was just AJ asking Punk before the match, like, do you think you could do the Shining Wizard in a way where I could turn that into the Styles Clash? And Punk was just like, I don't know, let's try. And it was just the whole match kind of felt like that. Like, could we do this? I don't know, let's do it. Like, let's try this.
Yeah, that's always great to hear. Like, guys are just like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it.
Yeah, and these two were telling it off tonight. Sometimes people have a match like that, and it's probably more like the Matt Striker Chris Sabin match. But these guys on this night were talented enough where like all these weird little things that they wanted to try all worked really well and were entertaining, and nothing got screwed up. AJ hit at if you're a fan of drop kicks, he hit a fantastic drop kick in this match, like Okada level. I got when I posted a gif of that on Twitter, I got one snarky person saying, AJ did that before Okada. And it's like, well, yeah, but you know what I mean. I'm saying, and in a way I'm kind of saying there was great drop kicks before Okada. And maybe it's also working Punk, who sometimes is a little light on some of his moves, but this was another match where I just noticed how hard hitting and crisp everything AJ Styles does. Like he's just so tight in execution on everything. Everything is just occasionally he might have an off match. I think a few shows ago he did, but usually it's just everything looks so solid and there's so much of a weight for a high flyer. Like there's so much weight to his moves. And
well, he's a pretty thick guy. Like he's stacked.
Yeah, he's got muscle mass out of the old wazoo, as they would say. Another thing, Punk ended up bleeding early on, and I thought, oh, did Punk like get cut from mat wrestling? And then Gabe pointed out he was cut earlier at a TNA show, and just I guess rolling around, the cut got opened up, but the cut seemed to like not bleed hardly at all.
The first time ever that you could say that about a CM Punk cut.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the first times where like Gabe called out an injury, and I was like, "Oh, that's informative," and I appreciate that. Like, so a lot of different things happening on this match. Before the match, you heard one fan heckle Punk by saying, "You suck in TNA too," which got a laugh. Like he wanted to expand his heckle. Like, I think you suck in a variety of places.
Uh-huh.
And then finally, this is something we've heard before, but it's something that like it irked me a little. Gabe and Doug during this match talk about the laws of honor, and they talk about like they go something to the effect of, it's not like you'll get DQ'd or fired over breaking these laws. It's more of a moral thing, and you'll have heat with the boys. And it's like, then why should we care? Like,
well, that's always been their thing, right?
Yeah, but I feel like this was the most naked, like open. They just like they literally just said like really nothing will happen to you. They
Right.
literally said it's more of a moral thing.
Right. You'll
Like
have heat with the boys is like, okay, but also lots of other things you could do will give you heat with the boys too. So,
it's just it's always weird when it's like we have 5 hard rules of honor here, like drawn and line in the sand. What will happen to you if you break them? Not much. HC Loke might be annoyed.
yeah.
I mean,
Wrestler's court.
yeah, exactly. So that brings us to intermission, and Gary Michael Capetta is backstage with the Backseat Boys. Gary keeps asking Johnny Cashmere what happened in their match tonight, but he won't answer, he won't talk. Trent's pissed off that Special K interfered. Cashmere walks away as Trent tries to get him to come back. So,
Yes.
building an angle that, can't wait for that angle.
Well, I was going to say, like, if there is a payoff to this, it's at the next show because I know that within 2 shows from now, they're just back as the Backseat Boys of old. So I'm actually wondering if like anything really because there's more to this later in the show, but like clearly they're building like a big like almost like reckoning point with Johnny Cashmere,
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem to lead to much.
Something I guess maybe I was debating whether to bring this up, but it seemed like Johnny Cashmere and Gabe Sapolsky did not get along, but I don't know how far back it went because I watched a bit of Johnny Cashmere's shoot interview to do some research for the show, and he makes it very clear he does not like Gabe Sapolsky. He recounts a time where he, I guess, and Trent got some opportunity doing some like minor work for WWE, and Gabe got, I guess, irritated and phoned Cashmere that Cashmere credited that to Paul Heyman and not to Gabe for hooking him up with that opportunity. So Cashmere didn't like that. And then I guess the big thing was Cashmere ended up missing a Ring of Honor show because he was sick, but then he ended up working his shift at a bar that night, and word got back to Gabe. Gabe called him, was really angry, like, oh, you can work at a bar, but you can't work a wrestling show. And they got into a fight, and that was like the end of it. So watching this shoot, you definitely like he makes some pretty snide comments about Gabe. I wonder how far back those went. Like maybe Gabe here was kind of trying to separate them because he already had given Trent 2 big singles matches.
Yeah, and the Backseat Boys are not long for ROH. Like they're around for a few more months, but that's it.
And Trent doesn't get to do much after that, but like he does get a match with Samoa Joe post Cashmere leaving.
Right.
So obviously Gabe had more time for Trent Acid than he had Johnny Cashmere.
For sure.
Meanwhile, we cut to Special K backstage partying in some room as Lit vomits into the bathroom toilet. Dixie is wondering how many ounces of drugs he can get for his Ring of Honor Tag Team title belt.
This seemed like the lamest party ever. They're just like, it's a few people in a quiet room. They're sort of shimmying a little bit, and one guy's puking. like that's literally the whole party. Like, what? I mean, I guess maybe drugs just make the lamest party seem cool. I mean, I'm not a drug user, so I don't know. But is that the implication here? Because this did not seem like a fun party. This wasn't exactly Studio 54.
Only dopes do dope, Matt. And Field of Honor Block B action. Something else that only dopes do is this match. Oh no, that's too mean. Field of Honor Block B match. Dan Moff defeats Jimmy Rave via pinfall in 6 minutes 50 seconds after he hits a burning hammer. This wasn't much of a match. Obviously, it's below 7 minutes. I wonder if part of that was because this was Moff's first match back from a pretty serious injury against Low Key. Maybe they were just like, let's ease him back into this, not do it too long. Jimmy Rave, I realized that the storyline of Jimmy Rave in the Field of Honor is he loses every match in part because he's ignoring AJ Styles' advice, and that's kind of building up a irritation for the future. So I realized that's part of the story. Even that being said, I thought Jimmy Rave came off like, I hate using this word, I hate when Brian Alvarez does it, but he came off as a geek, Matt, in this match. I felt like he got beat up a bit too much. There's a key moment in the match where he goes to hit his running knee, but Moff covers up clutches his injured neck, and so Rave takes pity on him and stops, and then of course, Moff was just suckering him and playing injured when he wasn't. And I think something that made him look even dumber was near the end of the match, he does his From Dusk Till Dawn crossface, which works over the neck, and Moff just kind of like gets out of it fairly quickly and goes right to his finish. And it just made it feel like not only did he like avoid the neck sometimes, when he did go to the neck with his finisher, Moff was like, yeah, whatever, I'm going to kick your ass. Like, Moff's the heel here, and Rave looked like just a complete, like, I've seen Ring Crew Express performances where the guy felt like more of a serious threat.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is completely true. I don't mind it as much as you, just for the very fact that it is the storyline. Like, like if you don't want to say geek, I'd say like the gimmick is like he doesn't listen to AJ, but also that he lacks a killer instinct. Like, he's talented, but he won't go in for the kill. He's too nice. He's too easygoing, and he gets destroyed for it. And I think it's a reasonable way to book a newcomer, like young guy. So I didn't mind it too much. I will say that Moff has a lot more charisma in the ring than he does on the mic after those last couple of shows, like the promos on the last show. He definitely, comes off as like having a personality here. He even gets a small welcome back chant, which is nice to hear. And I think he looks pretty good throwing Rave around the ring. Like, I actually enjoyed the heel spot where he's like throwing Rave into the guardrails, and then he goes to the crowd. He's like, "Move out of the way! I'm going to throw him in. I'm going to throw him into the crowd." And he teased like a big tease that he's going to like just chuck him into the crowd. Then he just spins him around and throws him back into the ring. I thought that was a very nice little heel spot that I don't ever remember seeing before. I'm sure he didn't invent it, but.
But one thing I really liked about that spot was that's when Jimmy Rave started his comeback, was right after that spot, and I felt like that's a perfect place for the comeback because it's like Moss spent so much time like just playing a joke on the fans. So I thought like that's the perfect time to like, if you're the babyface, to make your comeback because you've had this time to recover.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I did like that. Yeah,
that's a very good point. It's a good, and also like the comeback because it involved like Rave hitting that running knee off the apron, which I thought looked very good. I also enjoyed Punk here on commentary. I like Punk goes, "I'm still better than AJ Styles because I'm drug free and alcohol free," and Gabe's like, "So is AJ." and then also
that was one of Gabe's best lines.
Yes. And while I'm not into the misogyny of the situation, I do think this is a little different because I know that like Punk and AJ, I mean not Punk and AJ, Punk and Allison Danger, we're kind of friendly with each other. So like Gabe goes that Allison Danger is hot, which, whatever, that's Gabe. And Punk goes, "She's hot. She looks like toilet water."
Yeah, she says her hair's the color of 2,000 flushes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, just because she's a woman doesn't mean you're not allowed to razz on her. And Punk does this to everyone, so I don't really consider it part of like the misogynistic trend, just more him giving a hard time to a rival / buddy in the back.
Yeah.
So I thought that was funny, and I thought the Punk's delivery was very good there. The Burning Hammer got it dangerous. But yeah, I mean, it was not much of a match at all. It was just, I think it got the job done for what it meant to get done. I don't mind the booking of Rave here. He's eliminated from contention, by the way, with this match.
Yeah,
3 straight losses.
0-3. He doesn't get a win, and this Moff, because of the injury, he has to kind of play catch up. This is his first match in the tournament, so he's off to 1-0 when Rave is already done. But the only other thing I noticed in this match was Moff, he does have charisma, and I thought one weird thing he did was, like, he would do heel things like that tease of the crowd, where I'm going to throw a guy into the crowd and stuff like that, and he attacked Rave right at the bell, but yet he also sometimes would kind of do babyface things, like at the end of the match, he really plays up, like, the crowd reaction, like, stands on the turnbuckle and, like, poses as the crowd cheers him, like, it felt like he didn't, like, sometimes he wanted to be a heel, and then sometimes when the crowd's cheering him, it's like, oh, okay, I want this reaction right now.
Right.
Like,
true.
It's not like a horrible thing. It just felt like he couldn't quite make up his mind what he wanted because the crowd did, like, as you said, like, were like happy to see him back, and he kind of didn't really know how to play it exactly. I feel like some people would have just gone like, I'm going to say like, "F you, I don't want your applause," but he kind of was like, "Well, I want your applause, and I also want you to boo me sometimes."
Some people would have done that, but let's be honest, very, very, very few wrestlers would have done that. You don't really see too many guys in ROH, even in this era, and also now, who really commit to the heel thing when the crowd wants to like them.
And Daniels kind of had the same problem on the last show where he's supposed to be a heel against Samoa Joe, but that crowd loved him. They wanted Christopher Daniels desperately to win that match.
Right.
So, Post-match, we get backstage, and AJ Styles berates Jimmy Rave for not going after the neck. AJ even pulls out the classic dad line of, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed." So that storyline continues. Moff and Allison Danger are outside the building. Moff says 1 down, 2 to go in the Field of Honor. He goes on to say that he took Low Key's best shot at Bitter Friends, Different Enemies, and he's still standing, bitch. So
second show in a row where someone calls Low Key a bitch. I wonder if this is like an edict from on high at this point.
I believe it's like, I know the show where we'll be talking about the first split is the next show. So we're getting up on that point where tensions come up. But next up, we have a kind of a weird segment where Maryland Championship Wrestling, I just wrote here, person, Dan McDivitt comes to the ring to talk. Dan says he and another man ran this building every other month for 5 years as part of Maryland Championship Wrestling before they moved on to other things, and there's been no better replacement than Ring of Honor. He puts over Shane Shamrock, an indie wrestler who died tragically before his time. Dan says he worked with Ring of Honor that not only will Ring of Honor be returning to Baltimore, but they will be making it a regular home and will run a sixth Shane Shamrock Memorial Cup, which was a memorial tournament MCW used to promote, and that got one of the bigger pops on the show.
Does that end up being Survival of the Fittest?
Matt, that's a little bit of trivia. It becomes Survival of the Fittest. What happened is, basically, the weird world of like event promotion, you have to have a promoter's license to run shows in a state. And apparently it's hard to get a promoter's license. You can't just really get a new one. I don't know why the heck that is in your wacky country, Matt. But you have to just basically get the use of someone else's. So I guess this guy in Maryland Championship Wrestling had the access to someone named Dick Karakoffi's promoter's license. And then after the Rob Feinstein scandal happened, and then that second wave of the scandal happened in 2004, where it was revealed that Rob was still kind of involved, even though everyone said he wasn't, that he just said, I don't feel comfortable letting Ring of Honor use the promoter's license. And the Survival of the Fittest was still going to be that same tournament format that it ended up being, but it was going to be the Shane Shamrock Cup in Baltimore.
So were the previous Shane Shamrock Cups also that format where it's
I don't think
a six-person elimination? I don't think so.
I would have to go back and check. I don't think so, but all I know is that they just basically, the tournament was already booked that way, and they moved it to Philly because they lost their Baltimore promoter's license. And in fact, this is the first of only 2 shows of this era. I mean, Ring of Honor runs Baltimore now, but this era, like the draws they drew here was enough that it probably could have been a regular stop for Ring of Honor. And because they lost the promoter's license, they only run this show and then one more early 2004. And that's it for a long time. Just done.
One interesting thing that Dan McDevitt says, and I actually was curious your take on it, he says ROH was the best wrestling company in the country, bar none. And he says that it's the best locker room he's ever seen. Now, the best locker room he's ever seen, that's kind of a tricky one. I don't know what locker rooms he's seen. But was ROH the best wrestling company in October 2000, in the country, October 2003?
I'd have to go back and think, but
I think maybe yes.
I think maybe. I think it's a more exciting promotion. I feel like you're watching something that's more on the cutting edge, that's on the way up, and I think especially in a couple months, once we get to like Final Battle 2003, which is like apart from Otani and Tanaka, the first time Ring of Honor really does like a big Japanese talent show, like. I think that kind of changes Ring of Honor's perception where this is where big names like kind of like moonlight here in Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of rises a level above maybe the other indies in a whole new way. They're a couple months away from that. But I think even now you could probably make a case.
Yeah, if you were comparing it to like WWE at the time, 2003 was not a great year for WWE, especially on the booking end, but also like on the business end. And I think, when you look back, this era of 2003, like the second half of 2003, not a lot of great highlights. They were having Vince McMahon versus Stephanie McMahon on pay-per-view and things like that. I don't know. WWE's locker room, had a lot of legends at the time, and it was very talented. But as far as what they were doing with it, like you said, ROH was very exciting. The booking was pretty solid, and they still felt like they were a company on the rise. So I wouldn't say it's a stretch at all to say they were the best in the country at the time. And on the Indies, I don't really know who else was even competing for that title at this point.
And at this point in wrestling, there weren't a lot of things that felt like they were on the rise. Like WWE, it was that depressing era where we were kind of only 2 years after the boom really ended, and WCW and ECW went away, and it just felt like what's wrestling's future? And the Indies hadn't really filled a lot of the void yet, but Ring of Honor was starting to get to that spot. But I mean, people forget, Dave Meltzer said he thought that the Observer would go out of business within years when ECW and WCW went out of business. So it was kind of a depressing time for it wasn't a high bar to be kind of the most exciting, coolest place for wrestling at this point. I think just being something different and new was people were thirsty for it.
Yeah, I agree. So it's like a superlative statement, but not crazy at all.
And we come back after intermission with the match that fans either demanded or didn't demand, depending on how you thought why they voted on that poll the way they did, because it's Raven defeating Just Incredible via pinfall in 7 minutes 58 seconds after he hit the Raven Effect DDT. This was another match tonight I was not hugely fond of. It was really basic match. The one thing I appreciate about Raven matches is that even if sometimes they don't hit with me on a real emotional level, they're usually, at least a lot of the ones I've seen in Ring of Honor from this period, are well constructed in the sense of you can see all the parts and you go, oh, I know why they did this, I know why they did that. Credible gets the heat here, Raven makes his comeback, then they get to the point where they trade a few near falls and it's over. There's always a bit of a structure, and you can practically hear the pre-match meeting where it's okay, you'll do this, then I'll get the heat, then I'll do this, and then we'll go to this. But it was really basic. It felt just in a different way than the Special K Backseat Boys match, a TV match. It was short, it was kind of basic. There was no real reason for it to happen. Again, the poll, it felt weird that just a random because you fans demanded it poll match. I was not in love with this. I thought this was kind of a little average to maybe a little bit below average and it's obviously a bit of a different style. But all that being said, my one big caveat on that, which makes me feel guilty for criticizing this match at all, is that the Observer reported that Raven basically collapsed when he went through the curtain after this match from a severe migraine. Now, but he seemed okay later. Now, I've never had a migraine, but I've had serious headaches. I grew up with a mother who had serious migraines. I know how debilitating they can be. The fact that he was able to do any kind of wrestling match with a serious migraine, that on the wrestling match scale, this was average to a little below average. On the doing anything with migraine scales, this was an amazing performance because if he really did have a migraine, more power to Raven.
Yeah, this is sort of my reverse of the Backseat Boys match because I liked it a lot less than you in the sense that I thought it kind of sucked. But, like you said, the fact that he had the migraine, I think makes it, completely moot. Who cares? I'm glad that he was able to survive and not actually collapse and, have any serious medical problems based on doing this with a migraine.
You couldn't tell by watching it that he was in pain, but apparently a migraine severe enough that he just, collapsed.
Yeah, a Herculean effort by him. As far as, critiques of the match, Just Incredible is a guy who really you don't know what the hell he's supposed to be in ROH. Because he's a total babyface when he's with the Carnage crew, right? And then he's a total heel here. Doing heel spots, he does a baseball slide at Raven, who's sitting in the corner. Raven moves, and so Credible slides into the post, crotches himself. Total heel, fuck up move. Actually, at one point early in the match, the crowd chants Aldo at Just Incredible. And I put oh, how the mighty have fallen since that huge pop in Massachusetts a few months ago.
apparently Credible did a heel promo before the match that they cut out of the DVD release, where he complained about like all the One Wrestling sites and stuff, talking about how Raven's doing so good lately. So I don't know what that promo. Maybe that promo was really effective. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I guess.
All I know is they edited it off the DVD. So
maybe he went, "I am not Aldo Montoya," and that got the crowd to really chant Aldo at him. I did write, is this really what people came to ROH to see in 2003? And I put maybe. I guess, maybe.
They voted on this for a poll. They clearly craved this match.
Cravened it. I think Raven looks a lot better with the short hair than he did with whatever crazy yellow mop that he had before. But yeah, the highlight of the match was Punk on commentary. This is one of those situations that was sort of like Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura and like WrestleMania 4, where like the action in the ring sucks, but it's entertaining because the commentary is entertaining. So Punk was talking about, Carino and stuff, and Gabe announced that Punk and Carino would wrestle on the next show, and Punk was like, what kind of match are we going to see? And Punk was like, you're going to see a professional wrestling match, Gabe Sapolsky. And Gabe plugged a match, but like an upcoming, or not, he didn't plug it, but he kind of teased that there would be a Punk versus Tommy Dreamer match on the horizon. Yeah. That obviously never happened, but it clearly was something that Gabe wanted.
Thank God.
Yeah. Oh, another ridiculous chant at Credible was X-Pac's bitch, which is like, what? So random. This crowd was crazy. Like at some points they were pretty good actually, but their chants were ridiculous.
And maybe that does speak to maybe they were a more like mainstream WWE oriented crowd where they're like, oh, we're not like happy to see you back on the indies, Justin. More like, haha, you're not in WWE anymore, and we watch WWE.
But it's so weird that they randomly drew this. But yeah, so maybe Raven and Dustin Credible did draw the audience. Who the hell knows? But yeah, it was a nothing match. I thought it was a crappy match. I don't blame them for it, obviously, but I'm not going to say it was good because it wasn't. Punk at the end of the match stormed out of the booth after getting annoyed by Gabe's questions. Which,
about Lucy or whatever.
Who could blame him?
This was not what. Even though I was a little bit higher than you, I was not into. I just want to make clear, I was not into this match either. It was not a great match. I did kind of like. Maybe this is me being a hypocrite. Near the end of the match, there's a ref bump, and Raven gets a visual pinfall on Credible, but doesn't win. And then I think, for a sec, I forgot who won this match, so I thought, oh, great, Credible's going to win. But Raven won anyway. So it was kind of like a good twist in that it made me... But then again, the Backseat Boys and Special K kind of did the same thing. So maybe I'm just a massive hypocrite and a jerk and a bad person. I don't know.
Definitely, if there's anything that would stop you from getting into the good place, it's having an inconsistent opinion on a wrestling match.
Also... I did, as a negative against it, Ring of Honor hardly ever did the ref bump in this era, and so Raven using it for a meaningless, just incredible Raven match just to get a good near fall is seems kind of like a waste, kind of like that ECW style of I'm not thinking about the whole thing, I'm just thinking about whatever's going to get me a pop right now.
Right.
And I think Raven's one of the only guys. He's probably had 2 or 3 visual pinfall ref bump spots this year, and the rest of the roster combined has probably had 1. So it's different, that's for sure. Next up is the semi-main event, a 4-corner survival match. Xavier defeats Homicide with Julius Smokes, John Walters, and Mark Briscoe in 1646 when Xavier pinned Walters after hitting "Kiss Your Ex Goodbye." I don't have a ton to say about this, everyone. If you've listened long enough, you know I'm not a huge fan of these 4-ways. I thought it was perfectly fine. It was average as far as the standards of these 4-ways go. It wasn't one of the best ones. I felt like maybe the final few minutes were a little more special than you get from these 4-ways. The fans really got into this match in the final couple minutes, got loud, particularly after I feel after I think it was Xavier did a run of offense to Mark Briscoe, and then the crowd was like, oh, this is where the big stuff happens, this is the big moves, and they got real excited for that. Overall, though, it was just 17 minutes of guys doing stuff. There was a bit of story at the end where Xavier went to do a low blow on John Walters, but which he had used to beat John Walters in their singles match earlier in the year, but this time John Walters has it scouted, so Xavier just I think pokes his eye, and then hits "Kiss Your Ex Goodbye."
Eye poke.
So yeah, that's building. It's a way to build a little bit of a story of Walters learned something, but Xavier keeps foiling him because he's an asshole that's willing to cheat. And they're building a feud there, but yeah, I just the only thing I thought was interesting about that is I love Xavier goes for the low blow, and it's like, oh, it's a dastardly heel move. Homicide does a low blow too, and he does like low blows in like half of his Ring of Honor matches, but because he's Homicide, like the commentators never be like, oh, Homicide's a heel. It's just like, oh, yeah, when Homicide does it, that's just Homicide being Homicide. Like, he can low blow people all he wants. But
you needed Punk in there on commentary to point out the hypocrisy.
Yeah, exactly. But, Matt, did you like this any more than I did, or is it, I mean...
Well, so I feel like this show is a record for us disagreeing. I thought this match was like maybe the third best four-corner survival match they've done in 2003. I thought everyone looked really good. The only thing close to a botch was, I guess it was a botch. There was a move where Homicide was like superplexing Mark Briscoe off the top, and John Walters was going to go like for like a springboard powerbomb simultaneously, and Walters just botched it, and Homicide just hit the suplex, and it ended up being fine. And that was everything else looked great. Like, you know, Xavier's chops even seemed brutal. You know, like there was just like, you know, lots of cool moves. You know, cop killer on Briscoe. Walters broke it up. Xavier went for a 450 while Walters was standing, which I guess was a little bit goofy. So of course he missed that. But, you know, the dive sequence was really good. You know, like Homicide hit his dive. Xavier did a springboard Arabian press. The best one was Briscoe's shooting star press. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I liked... you know, I like the stuff between Walters and Xavier. I like that they had a little bit of a rivalry. I also like the stuff between Mark and Walters because they were both like playing the hungry up and comers. And they had a few different moments where things broke down and everyone hit spots. And this match was, I feel like, shorter than some of the other four corner survivals, so it was a lot more action packed. I thought the last few minutes were awesome. I thought Homicide looked good, but he didn't like dominate the action in the match. I thought Walters actually looked really good. I think he's like better in these multi-person matches where he just gets to hit a few of his big moves, like the Hurricane DDT and a top rope Hurricane DDT. With that move always looks really good. I liked when Walters belly-to-belly suplexed Homicide into the corner. It was a big match with big moves, but also you had a little bit of the storyline with Walters and Xavier to kind of tie it together. And these matches are meant to just be fun. And I thought this match was really fun, but also really hard hitting, and everyone was working really hard. Yeah, I would say probably the third best of the four corner matches that they've done so far. And I don't know. I thought it was very good. I really, really enjoyed it.
Here's the weird thing. Like, if I'm not going to do this, but if I went back and looked at my opinions of all the four corner matches they've done in 2003, I'm not counting the championship one they did in 2002, but I might agree with you that this is the third best, but I think that the gulf between this one and then the top two is huge. Like, I feel like that one at Death Before Dishonor and maybe like the first one that really got things going in 2003, like I feel like those matches are probably I felt like this one was not bad. I just felt like it was in the pack and maybe a tiny bit ahead of the pack or in the pack. I don't felt there's just, it's not that it did anything wrong. It's like nothing grabbed me as like, oh, this is a lot more exciting than what we typically see.
Yeah, I mean, these matches are not for everyone. I did think it was more exciting. I would probably say the gulf between 1 and 2 is pretty high. Death Before Dishonor and Revenge on the Prophecy. But the gulf between 2 and 3 is not that high for me. And I could even see myself, like, I'd have to watch that one again. I could even see myself saying this one's better than that one. But I liked that you had the up and comers and also the veterans, and Homicide, added the star power, and Mark Briscoe has just been, killer in everything he's done lately. Yeah. And, Xavier looked better than usual, and Walters, I thought this was a good spot for him. So I was very pleased with it.
Couple other notes. One spot that was kind of ridiculous, and I've seen this a few times in wrestling, where Walters has Briscoe and Xavier in simultaneous submissions, and Walters loves doing that, getting two guys in submissions at once. And so Homicide comes in, and he runs the ropes back and forth for like an hour before he hits a drop kick to break it up. And like, you know, that's kind of a crowd-pleasing, goofy spot, and the fans like it. But I would love to see that spot in one of these matches where the guy's running the ropes forever, and then after like 20 seconds of running the ropes, one of the guys just submits before he can do the drop kick to break it up. Like, I would love if that like came back to bite someone in the ass. I think that would be hilarious. Like, just keep running the ropes, and the guy taps out. He's like, shit.
Yeah, I don't think that ever happens. Probably.
No, somebody like. So I know we got people in wrestling. Like, book that match for me, please. You'll sell one VOD right here. Let me just see. Gabe actually called the cop killer the Kudo driver, and for once didn't say, "Oh, I can't call it the cop killer." He just said the Kudo driver. So Gabe on his best behavior today.
He got a talking to from that parole officer.
Gabe continues to call Walters blue chip and can't miss. Even on the website, going back to like the archived website, pretty much every time they reference John Walters, they have to say he's a blue chip prospect, to the point where it's basically his nickname. And I wonder if that like kind of dragged him down. I wonder if just the fact that they kept hammering that home, because they really sold no one else in Ring of Honor as a blue chip can't miss prospect.
Yeah, and Walters. I was going to say, Walters is good, but I don't think he's like the standout of the young up-and-comers on the roster. So it is interesting that he's getting that treatment.
So part of me wonders if maybe they oversold him and actually hurt his career in Ring of Honor because of that. Because, you know, if he's just a guy in the pack, you go, yeah, he's not bad. But when you just keep saying over and over again, he's can't miss, he's a blue chipper, he's a future star, now you've raised the bar so high, and as you just said, there's other good guys coming up. So
yeah,
it kind of makes it look like, what are you talking about, you know? And then finally, on a little funny comedy note, after Punk being on and off commentary so much and Joe popping in, we're back to Gabe and Doug. And at one point when they're putting over Mark Briscoe, Doug says there's a glass ceiling for Mark Briscoe, but like there's a good thing. And then Gabe has to correct him like, no, you mean he's going to break through the glass ceiling. But Doug was really like, yeah, Mark's going to do great. There's a glass ceiling for Mark Briscoe. It's like, no. Maybe he meant he's going to make so much money he'll be able to afford all glass ceilings in his house. I don't know. But
yeah, that's also not good. Be very hot.
Yeah.
Summer.
Next, we get a Jim Cornette promo hyping his return to Ring of Honor at the next New Jersey show. He says he's going to be, quote, in the middle of the corner, unquote, of Samoa Joe. So he's going to stand very precisely, apparently. And Cornette does a few rhymes and then says Joe is going to do some of his biddings, which,
I mean, obviously there'll be plenty of Cornette to talk about through the years in ROH, but he never really seemed like a good fit, to be honest. It seemed forced.
You hit the nail on the head. Like this one, like there's sometimes where he kind of fit in a little bit. This one, he really felt like he felt like a guy trying to talk about something he really didn't completely understand.
Right, exactly. Also, most of his ROH promos, like that he does on these shows, teasers, like they're all kind of the same. Yeah.
And they're the same kind of promos it feels like he would cut in 1993 or 2003.
Right.
Like about any promotion. Like he could do 20 of these.
It actually makes ROH seem a little bit low rent because it's just like, oh, like the star is coming in to pop in for the indie. Like instead of actually being a part of the tone of what they're actually going for. You know what I mean? Like he's just like it's just something that he's gonna pop. He's like basically treating it like a generic indie.
And also, he's talking like he's doing the very old school thing where he's like, "I'm coming because I smell money." He keeps talking about how he smells money and a chance to make money. Like I feel like most fans realize the economics of indie wrestling.
Yeah,
and it just seems forced. Like
yes,
if you smell money, maybe you should get your nose checked because it's not Ring of Honor is not the place where you're going to get rich.
Yeah, obviously, his upper lip smells a lot like money.
And that brings us to the main event, Ring of Honor World Title match. Samoa Joe successfully defends his title, defeating Jay Briscoe in 15 minutes, 6 seconds after he hits a lariat. Matt, the Observer, wrote on this match, the idea with this match was to get Jay Briscoe over stronger as a real contender, and it worked so well that now the plan is to try to elevate both brothers to the main events. Did you think this match worked that well?
Yes. Unequivocally. I feel like this was a very basic, like, style of match. Like, in terms of, like, okay, so you had the smaller, plucky underdog, you have the big bully champion, and the champion's gonna dominate. The underdog's gonna get some hope spots. He's going to survive some things you don't expect him to survive, and in the end, he's going down. And that's exactly what they did. But it worked so well, in part because of obviously the talent of the performers involved, but also because the crowd was just so willing to buy it. And I feel like maybe in front of another crowd this wouldn't have been as good, but it was in front of this crowd. So this is the crowd redeeming themselves for me. I would say a lot. But also the execution was great. There's nothing surprising about what they did here. There's no little nuance, I don't think. Maybe you picked up on some stuff that really would break out of that storyline that I just described. But the moves they did, the execution, the timing was great. So you start out, Mark appears in Jay's corner. Mark is clutching his neck, but he's there for moral support. And Joe is working him over. He's doing little kicks to taunt him. Then he's doing big kicks to wear him out. He starts working on Jay's back. He hits a backbreaker. He hits a deep Boston Crab. Very nonchalant. But then Jay comes back with a Yakuza kick or two Yakuza kicks and a plancha from the top turnbuckle. So every time Jay did a comeback, it was an intense comeback. It wasn't just I'm going to do an Irish whip, he was doing intense stuff and it looked really
urgency.
Good. Yeah, exactly. There was one point where Jay is actually beating on Joe outside the ring, whipping him into guardrail. Joe actually slips at one point, getting whipped into the guardrail, but he's able to recover and just kind of slide into it, and he's okay. It doesn't look that embarrassing. But, crowd really gets into Jay as he's doing that. Joe comes back, he does the Olay kicks, and this time he actually his Olay kicks, he does 2 in a row uninterrupted. Because in the past few shows, I feel like his flow has been interrupted a little bit. And Joe goes back to, being arrogant. And you could tell Joe is sort of playing heelish a little bit here. Not full cheating or anything, but just, the arrogance of everything.
Yeah.
Joe, it's funny because Joe has Jay in an STF, and Jay is slamming the mat in pain, almost looks like he's tapping out. And right as he's doing that, Gabe goes, "He's refusing to tap."
He literally taps twice, 2 times, and Gabe says he's refusing to tap.
Yeah, it was very funny. Another thing that was funny, at the beginning of the match, Gabe said, if Jay hits the Jay Driller, he'll be the champion. And I'm like, oh, just embarrass me more with my wrong prediction about the Jay Driller. Fine, thanks. But, Joe comes back. Jay starts to come back after Joe's rolling cradle with a big backdrop driver, so I love that urgency. He hits a Falcon Arrow for 2, which I thought was really impressive, just because, Joe's a big guy. And Jay powers Joe into a Death Valley driver, and the crowd loves this. The crowd's just wow, this is impressive. And it is. They're really into it. Joe goes for the choke, and Jay actually bites his thumb to escape it. And so Joe just goes crazy, hits a dragon suplex and slaps and kicks Jay and hits an island driver, and Jay kicks out, and I actually was shocked that Jay kicked out of that. I thought that was a great spot and a great use of a near fall, because sometimes these near falls are gratuitous. That one added so much to the match, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And then Joe hits the big lariat for 3. And the crowd actually boos Joe winning. Joe really positioned himself early as the babyface standard bearer for the company, and he turns himself full heel to this crowd because they get so into Jay Briscoe. So, yes, it worked on every level in getting Jay over as a top guy.
This was my match of the night. I liked it a bit better than the AJ Punk match. I thought, again, I wouldn't put it at that, you have to go see it, but maybe right at the level below that. Really good match. Very, very good. And, I think this is a great match for people. Some people complain about modern wrestling, especially modern indie wrestling, that it's too much your move, my move, back and forth, back and forth. I like those matches, but I like everything in moderation. I do feel like maybe too much of wrestling is like that. If you don't like that style, this is a great match for you to watch because it's like the first third of it, Jay Briscoe might get zero offense other than maybe a tiny bit of mat wrestling at the very beginning. And then, as Matt said, when he makes his comebacks, they feel like real shifts, and he gets like huge urgency, like almost frantic to try and take out Joe. And then he'll be on offense for a while, and then a big move will happen, and then Joe will be back in control for a while. So it's the exact opposite of like every move is back and forth. It's like Joe's dominating, and Jay's getting these comebacks, and then Joe's getting the control again. And then at the end, it's a little bit more move, your move, my move, but not really. It all feels pretty earned to me. And yeah, it's just Joe. This is one of those early Joe matches that starts to feel more like I remember Joe matches feeling like a little bit different. I feel like something this match and the AJ Punk match both had that some indie wrestling doesn't have is as the match goes on, it doesn't speed up. It actually slows down a little bit to its like benefit. Like they let the moves breathe a little more at the end, and
yeah, it's called selling, and they do a really good job of it. Yeah,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go on.
Well, just the weight of the match bears down on them, and that was the type of selling they were doing, and it wasn't in that obnoxious like Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Hell in a Cell kind of way. It was in a like more believable way that fits in pace with the rest of the match.
I feel like, and again, I like modern wrestling, but I feel like a lot of wrestling now has gone in the direction of a match speeds up as it goes on and gets more and more exciting and fast-paced, and then it just ends in this flurry of back-and-forth action, where I feel like matches like this, the idea is, as the match continues, it gets a little bit slower because they're getting more tired, and also because every move should be more important, because as we get deep into the match, any move could be the finish. So every move should have, like, a spotlight on it, like, oh, shit, hit the Island Driver. Well, now what's he going to do if he can't win with that? It shouldn't just be, it should have that, give you time to think about the moves.
Yeah.
I think wrestlers have talked about, that's one of the reasons why you have selling, is you want fans to think about what just happened. You want to actually give them time to think. And again, there's more than one way to do a match. Sometimes you don't want fans to think. Sometimes you just want to stun them with like a flurry of spectacle. And I thought the end was my favorite part of the match, and one of my favorite things in Ring of Honor wrestling this year, because what I loved about that thing you talked about, the Island Driver kick out, is Gabe sells it on commentary as, oh, no one's kicked out of the Island Driver. Now, I don't know if that's true. My memory for that kind of stuff is bad, but I like that he sold it that way. And what I really liked is that Jay kicks out of the Island Driver, but Joe beats him like shortly after that with like the lariat, and Jay never gets more offense. It puts over Jay because Jay kicks out this move that no one survives, but at the same time, the move still is really put over as well, because it's like, okay, the move didn't beat Jay, but it all but beat him. Like, there was no coming back from that. Like, he was struggling to survive, and he barely survived, but he still was so out of it, he was never going to win after that. And I like that. I think that I like those kinds of finishes where there's real drama like that, where the guy is probably dead in the water, but he's still in the match, but he's probably not going to win.
Right.
Like, it's just, how's he going to get put down here?
Right, and also Joe sold the kick out. Like, he did that stunned look on his face, like the Undertaker against Shawn Michaels that time. Like, he was just like, how on earth? And everyone was reacting the same way, which is great.
Yeah, like, people should look at this match. If you want to look at when people talk about, oh, a guy got more over in losing, I think a lot of people just assume, oh, that means they just had a back and forth match and it was a good match. And yeah, sometimes that gets people over in losing, but there are little specific things you can do in a match, like that near fall and that reaction Joe had, that can get a guy over in losing, where it's like a purposeful thing. I'm going to give this guy this thing,
right.
This little moment, and that will elevate him. And this was really good match. I also felt like one thing that kind of surprises me, but shouldn't, watching Jay Briscoe from this era, is when you watch Jay Briscoe today, he's so charismatic and just this big, hairy, woolly bearded, like super aggressive, scary, charismatic hillbilly. It's hard for me to imagine Jay Briscoe as like the sympathetic, baby-faced, super young-looking underdog, but he was so good at it. I think he was one of Joe's best opponents in this era in terms of just making Joe look like an absolute monster. That point where he's in the STF or the Boston, I think the Boston Crab, and he's screaming and gets to the ropes. He's screaming so hard being in that move. When he gets into the ropes, like the crowd reacts. Like it's like a big deal that he survived a Boston Crab.
Early in the match, too.
Yeah. Like he did such a good job selling it. He like got a reaction that I think 90% of wrestlers or more wouldn't have gotten in that same position. He just milked that move so perfectly.
Yeah.
And again, yeah, the urgency of his comebacks where it felt like he was like, shit, this is my one shot. Like when that first comeback he makes where he hits the couple Yakuza kicks and then he does the dive from the top to the floor, his dive was really kind of awkward. He basically just jumped off the top and fell feet first straight down onto Joe with his arms out. But for me, that kind of worked because it was like he's so desperate. He's like doing flying moves and he's not even comfortable doing them. He's just like, shit, I got to do something now. Jump off this high thing. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll figure it out. And one other thing I noticed, too, is this match continues. Joe has won so many matches this year in so many different ways. He's won this year in Ring of Honor with the Muscle Buster, with the rear naked choke, with an arms captured German suplex, with a dragon suplex, and now he's won with a lariat. And he's won with the Island Driver. Like, he's had so many different finishes this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's another thing to keep an eye on. Like, when does he finally settle into, like, the choke and the Muscle Buster, and those are his finishers?
Yeah, I don't know. And Gabe, we also got, like, the best and worst of Gabe commentary here because when at one point he goes, I think that Jay Briscoe hits the Jay Driller here. Like you mentioned it, like Jay's definitely winning the Ring of Honor title, and I thought, oh boy, like this is going to be the first one that Matt used to talk about. Like Jay, someone's going to kick out the Jay Driller, but he never gets the Jay Driller. So Gabe actually alluded to something for once that did not happen, and he turns into a double arm DDT instead when he can't get it, which I thought was a cool spot. But then later you get the worst of Gabe because he says, you have to wonder how long before a Briscoe holds a championship here in Ring of Honor. And I'll just give you guys the answer. It's 2 shows.
Yep.
So it's the opposite of the... So you got the good Gabe and you get the bad Gabe here. The two faces of Gabe. That classic WWE compilation.
That's going to be the name of our special episode when we finally get Gabe on the show.
Yeah. We'll talk to him and we'll play good cop, bad cop. So,
that's right.
Immediately after the match, Joe flips off the crowd. Some boo, some applaud, some chant Ring of Honor. Joe is super cocky after the match. He was during, as Matt mentioned too, but he shakes a nearly unconscious Jay's hand and he's laughing. Mark gets in the ring to defend his brother, and Joe doesn't look like he'll retaliate, but he turns out he's just waiting until Mark turns his back, and then he hits an enziguri and chokes Mark out. Crowd chants, "Fuck you, Joe," as Gabe says he thinks Joe is frustrated by the Briscoes and that we haven't seen the last between Joe and the Briscoes.
It's very interesting that they're like, while they're making Joe their big baby face, they're also making him more of a heel.
Yeah, it's kind of, in a way, weird. Like, I don't know how much of that was purposeful. Like, I don't know how much of a plan they had for the Joe character. I know when I watched the Joe shoot interview to kind of prepare for this, he really liked this match, and he talked about he felt like at first, like in the opening of the match or maybe the opening segment, that Jay wasn't as over as they thought he was going to be, being like kind of what they thought was from the area. Delaware, not quite Maryland. But he said he was really proud of the fact. He said, you might think this is weird, but I was really proud that by the end of the night, I had fans saying, like, fucking die, Joe. Like, I hope you die. Like, he says, that made me feel really good. He says, as weird as that to say. So I think Joe sees this as a match where he really, like, turned the crowd, and, like, he views that as a really good accomplishment in his career.
I agree with that, both of those things.
Yeah, and definitely, like, there's a moment in this match where At the start of the match, like the people are chanting for Joe. Once he gets that rear naked choke while he tries to get it on Jay, the crowd boos. Like in the course of the match, they've turned it from like we like Joe to fuck, we don't want you to win. And
they did a great job. They really did.
Yeah. And next we get a backstage promo at some show. I don't know where because it wasn't this show because it's Christopher Daniels who didn't work tonight. Daniels admits that at Glory by Honor 2, Joe was the better man, but there'll be more shots coming down the line. Daniels continues to say that the title is his destiny, and I just wrote, boy, that's a long destiny considering how long it took him to finally win the Ring of Honor World title. Daniels moves on to Steve Corino, saying that Steve wishing him luck at the last show was a curveball for him. Daniels tells the story of the snake nursed back to health by a man, only for the snake to bite and kill the man, telling the man, I'm a snake, what did you expect? Very similar to the story Punk would tell a couple years later in Ring of Honor.
He would tell that one better, though. But
yeah,
yes.
Definitely. Speaking of Punk, Daniels again denies that he attacked Lucy, who he calls a painted-up floozy, which is like a very old man, to me, style. Put down, you painted-up floozy. He might as well have just called her a harlot or something. Daniels says the next time he's face-to-face with Punk, he won't laugh it off. Daniels congratulates Moff and Xavier on their wins tonight, and he congratulates Ring of Honor on opening up a new market. But he takes credit for that, and he says shows he isn't on are a little less big and a little less exciting.
We can get into whether or not that's true, but the whole thing they're doing with Xavier, is he in the prophecy, is he not, pretty half-assed. Because, Xavier never acknowledges it at all. And they have Alice in Danger come out, at the last show, and, Daniel still mentioned him, but it's like, and they had that match a few months earlier, but it's like, are you going to do something with this or aren't you? And I don't know if they actually ever really do.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of the Field of Honor build-up where the announcers were kept going, what's the Field of Honor? We got to figure it out. What is it? Who's in it? And this, every time Xavier comes out now, they're like, oh, Alice in Danger isn't in with him. Is he out of the prophecy? Oh, but he cheated. That must mean he's still in the prophecy. And you just, as a fan, are left going, why don't you just ask somebody?
Yeah.
Why don't you just ask Xavier? He does a promo tonight. Someone ask him. Maybe he'll answer. It's just weird. But backstage, we go to a John Walters promo. He says he requested this promo time. I'm going to say that was a bad request. He cuts a not very good promo about Xavier cheating him yet again to cost him a second match. Walters says he was driven to compete at an early age, and his dad taught him there were only two options in life, winning and winning. Sounds like he had a real shitty dad, I wrote. Walters says about Xavier that Xavier pissed on the rules or Ring of Honor or something by cheating, and then Walters says the immortal words, you piss on me, I piss on you, Xavier. And just great stuff from John Walters.
So, I'm pretty sure that Walters is a Trump fan, so I guess I'm serious.
Okay.
So I think that obviously the pissing might be part of it. I don't know. I'm just speculating there, but but yeah. So obviously this wasn't a good promo, but Walters is learning, and his promos are he needs to practice for them to be good. So it's good that they give him time, but then at the same time, it's like what the material they're giving him is not good at all, because he's whining, right? He's like, oh, you disrespected everything, and he's like, I'm not bitching, I'm not crying. It's like, well, yes you are, but also he doesn't come off like a baby face at all. He's winning and win. That's not something a babyface would say. He's like, you disrespected me, blah, 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 blah. And I know that John Walters eventually finds his niche on the mic as an aggressive racist. I get that. but that's years away. Listen, am I saying anything that's controversial here?
No, you're not. I also thought it was, he didn't come off likable here, because not only is he too serious and too whiny, but at one point he goes something about Dad taught me there's only two options, winning and winning. And then either moments before or after he says that in the promo, he says something like, if you hadn't cheated, I would have accepted my loss as a learning experience. And I was like, I thought you just said there's only two options, winning and winning, but you then say you would have accepted a loss. Here's
the other thing. He keeps calling him Xavier, And I'm like, didn't anybody bother to correct him? It's like, no, it's actually Xavier. And and the first time he says it, like very early in the promo, Gabe could have been like, all right, let's do that over. It's Xavier, just so you know. But they just let him say Xavier, Xavier, Xavier over and over again. And I feel like that's not a good look for him.
But after the Dr. Keith show last time, I do feel like you kind of already said it, but I do have to have a bit more sympathy of, yes, guys need promo time because how are they going to get better? Although I also do think promos are something you could probably practice in your bathroom to the mirror.
Sure.
It's like people say with wrestling, no matter how many drills you do, there's no substitute for actually wrestling matches. I feel like there is a substitute for cutting a backstage promo. It's called talking to your comb.
I suppose so. I can still forgive it, but the material you can't forgive because he could have been coached on this, and he was given bad material to work with.
Something about Ring of Honor promos is it never feels like there was ever a take two. There's been flubs we see. It always feels like whatever it was, no one ever said, let's redo that again. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but it never feels like anyone said, you know what, how about we try it this way this time? It always feels like whatever they say, cut, okay, that's going on the DVD. Okay.
That's definitely true.
I know they probably were limited for time backstage, but anyway, the camera does one of those seamless transitions, wink, wink, where Gabe goes, that's a wrap on the promo, and then the camera turns and 5 feet away something else is happening. In this case, Johnny Cashmere is leaving the building. Trent Acid stops him. He wants to know what's up. Cashmere says he just needs time. Acid is perplexed. So, continuing to hint at a breakup angle that I don't think happens.
Right. It's weird. It's just weird. This is very intense stuff that they're going through that really doesn't amount to anything.
Yeah, I'm still wondering if maybe Gabe wanted to split them up, and then maybe they said, "Oh, we don't want to do that." That's the only thing that makes sense here because they definitely took a sharp right turn on this show. But next, we get an Xavier promo. Xavier mocks Walters, saying he's beaten him twice now, and a win's a win. Xavier says he's going to win the Field of Honor, but if Walters wants another match, how about a tag match of the Purists, which is Tony Mamaluke and Walters, versus Xavier and a partner of his choice? This promo reminded me that the Purists still existed for one more match at least. That's about it.
Or they thought they wanted it to at the very least, yeah.
And then finally we end with a very short Briscoe's promo. Mark and Jay recovering. Jay says Joe won the battle tonight, but the war has just begun.
I like this. I thought this was perfect length of what they had to do, and the delivery was fine.
Yeah, it was 30 seconds just letting you know this isn't over. And that was the show. So, Matt, this was the debut in a new market. I felt this was a weird up and down show. I thought there were highs and lows to this. What did you think?
I think this is how you do a B show. In the sense of, this was definitely a B show in that there were no marquee matches. There were no big storyline blow-offs. There was some small angle advancement in there was a tag title change. There were some very good matches with the stars they had in terms of AJ and Punk. I liked the 4-corner match, personally. And the main event was really good. But so the matches that needed to be good were good. Not everything was great, and there was definitely some lesser stuff on there. But I think in the ring, this was better than the last A show they had, which was Glory by Honor 2. I think this was definitely a better wrestling show overall than that was. The main event maybe on that one was a little bit better, but not that much better. And there was more good matches on this, I'd say, easily, even if it was less, quote, important and the atmosphere was less, intense. But what it also, I thought about was, this is kind of, in some ways, a rebuilding period for ROH. Not in terms of, a lot of new guys coming in and getting major spots, but if you think about it, what are the ongoing storylines in ROH right now? There aren't that many. There's Punk trying to figure out what's going on with Lucy. There is, I guess there's an issue building with Moff and Homicide and Loki, although, Loki's gone for a while, even in best case scenario. But the Joe and Daniels thing is sort of on ice for a little while. So now they're building into new feuds, mid-card stuff like Xavier and John Walters, and then there's the Backseat Boys, what's going to happen with them, and they just began one of, honestly, kind of Samoa Joe's first real personal issue in the entire time he's been in ROH, which is with the Briscoes. This is a brand new feud. This is debuted basically tonight from this match. So this is almost the beginning of a new chapter in ROH. So even though it's a B show, it's significant. You know what I mean? And I thought it was good. Like you did say, it was up and down, but it had genuine good stuff, and the main event, really delivered. And I feel like it's setting into action some good stuff going forward.
I guess, as you mentioned earlier, that this was a show we probably disagreed the most on some matches. I guess it makes sense that we probably disagree a fair bit on what we think of the show as a whole. I enjoyed watching the show, but I was kind of down on it because I thought there was two very good matches, but neither of them were quite good enough to be like, you have to go out of your way to see it. But there was two very good matches, AJ and Punk, Joe and Jay. But, I thought there was a lot of stuff on this show that was either average or not good. Like the Striker match that's full of botches, the Rave match that was basically a squash, the Raven match that was, nothing, maybe because of the migraine. I didn't like the tag title match. And, stuff like BJ, Colt, and the 4-Way were average, and the Scramble was average, but I thought there was a lot of average, two very good matches, and then a lot of stuff that kind of didn't work. And usually Ring of Honor, even on their shows that were more in the middle on, it was more just, there's a lot of average and a little bit of really good. This show, I felt like a bunch of average, couple really good things, and then more than usual of things that just kind of either felt completely inconsequential or not, or like below average as wrestling, which I think is rare for Ring of Honor at this point. But I do think you make a great point about where Ring of Honor is at this point, because they are in transition, and they're almost going to be transitioning from this point too, because going to what you said, like the Raven Punk feud has one more match left. It's basically over. And then they got stuff like the Backseat Boys thing, which isn't going to happen. The low-key feuds with Homicide and Moff that aren't going to happen. The Field of Honor, they're still in the middle of that, and that's not going to turn out great. It's like there's a lot of... Even the Punk-Daniels feud is, not going to get a resolution. It's kind of amazing to see, like, knowing how good Ring of Honor is going forward, how many things that are kind of going on right now that aren't going to go the way they plan, that they're going to have to roll with. Like a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, like, in each individual case, how it's dealt with.
Yeah, but yet, like, I know the shows coming up are going to be good, really good, probably. Like, based on my memories and the lineups, like, so it's interesting to see that, they were a resilient company in that sense, where if things like a Field of Honor tournament didn't turn out great, that wasn't going to sink the company or even sink an individual show.
Will you at least admit that this was a lot better than the Dayton debut?
Yes, because there is the AJ Punk and the Joe Jay matches are far more memorable than anything on the Dayton debut.
Yeah.
I will remember these matches more than I'll remember anything in Dayton. So definitely it's better in that sense. No, absolutely. And again, I think it's a hard show because, again, it's up and down. Like there are pretty high highs on this show, but there are also some fairly low lows by Ring of Honor standards.
There was nothing terrible though. I mean, the closest thing to terrible, in my opinion, was actually a match you kind of liked more than me, which was the Raven and Credible match. But I don't think there was anything like embarrassingly bad. And we should reiterate, there was no man-on-woman violence, which is a big deal, and I feel like the show should get a lot of. Unfortunately, I mean, it's grading on a curve because like we shouldn't give something credit for just basic human decency, but I feel like some credit for the end of that streak. It actually makes me wonder now: do they just pick right back up where they left off with a new streak starting on the next show?
If there's man-on-violence on the next show, I am going to be pissed because if you break the streak for nothing. Oh boy, like, if you break the streak because you got a little bit of religion, so to speak, and like, realize the error of your ways and don't do this for a few shows, good on you. If you break the streak and then the very next show you're like, back at it, oh man.
There is no way that this was intentional. Like, come on, man. Like, they didn't even think about that for a second.
Yeah, they did not. They just didn't have enough women on the show. Like, Alexis Lurie just left. Lollipop wasn't here tonight. Like, there was only two women that they could have even done something with. There was Allison Danger during one match with Dan Moff, which barely lasted any amount of time, and with Becky Bayless. That's it. They
Yep.
could have done a Becky Bayless spot. I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't.
They did. They did still say mean things about her on commentary.
Yeah, but they could have very easily, because there was so much Special K interference, done a Becky Bayless like attack. So,
Well,
credit to them, they didn't do that.
Yeah, credit to them. They didn't do the worst thing they always do.
But I guess one thing I want to say, though, what you were saying, like, I agree that there was nothing like horrible on this show in terms of matches, but at the same time,
or booking.
Yeah, but when we think about it, I guess what I'm doing is I'm not comparing it to All Wrestling right now. I'm comparing it to other Ring of Honor shows, and like nothing was a terrible match, but most Ring of Honor shows usually have like bottom out at average, and I feel like when you look by that comparison, when's the last time on a Ring of Honor show that we've been watching have you seen a match as not good as Raven Just Incredible, or when's the last time you've seen a match that wasn't like a spot fest with as many botches as Sabin Matt Striker? Like, it's not that they were horrible. It's just I feel like they're lows for like 2003 Ring of Honor at certain points.
There was nothing to me. Yes, you're right. Although there was nothing to me that I disliked or found as dull as the Four Corner Survival match from Wrath of the Racket with Michael Shane and Hernandez and Slick Wagner Brown. Like that, I think was like a pretty low in the ring, and because nothing was long enough to be that dull. But yes, you make a good point.
I think what we've learned from this discussion is less about this show and more that if our end of year awards had a worst of the year award for shows,
it should.
we would put Wrath of the Racket.
Spoiler alert: we're going to have that, and it's going to happen.
So, and with that, we come to the end of another episode. If you guys want to get in contact with us, ThROH The Years at gmail.com. That's THROH for through. At Trevor Dame on Twitter or at Mayor MGF. We're on all sorts of message boards, Pro Wrestling Only, Voices of Wrestling, Figure 4 board. And next time we will be covering Empire State Showdown. Ring of Honor returns to New York for the last time for quite a while. We're getting Homicide versus Samoa Joe, the big rematch from Do or Die. This time it's no DQ. And in addition, we're getting the famous, maybe infamous, CM Punk Steve Corino match where the pre-match mic work is nearly as long as the match. And it's a pretty long match.
I am looking forward to that.
Me too. Thanks again, Matt. This was another great show. And everyone, just thanks for listening. We really appreciate it.